Welcome everyone to another exciting episode of the Gin and Tonic Show, panel discussion show about Islam in the Middle East. This week we are discussing science in the Quran, or lack thereof. If at any point you wish to call in and join the panel, just send a Skype contact request to the Gin and Tonic Show. If you've already done so, just send me a message on the contact list, and we'll bring you on when we're ready to have guests. Please do not call into the show. We will call you when we are ready to take you on. When you come on, make sure to mute and minimize your blog TV window, otherwise it will disrupt the flow of the show. Also, all guests are advised that if you call into the show, this is being broadcast live on being broadcast live on Blog TV and being recorded for later upload onto YouTube. Okay, so we'll start with Klingschor. Science in the Quran. What is the claim? Where does it come from? And why is it wrong? Or is it wrong?
Okay, essentially the claim actually, it's a very ancient claim. We have some medieval Muslims claiming that the Quran contains, essentially it was the medieval version of what we have. So instead of saying that it contains like the electric guitar in Elvis Presley, they're saying that, oh, it contains mention to spinning wheels and like stuff like that, which is really hilarious to me. But in modern times, the Quran challenge was revived, I think actually in Turkey. And this is not very well known, but in Turkey, after the caliphate was abolished and Kemal Mustafa Ataturk instituted secularism, there were many Islamic or Islamist revival movements that were sort of in response to this, and one of them was the Sayyid Nursi movement. These movements really kick-started this whole science in the Quran shtick again. And then this is where it comes from. This was particularly picked up by Harun Yahya, who's also a very famous, in fact, the most famous Muslim, but also Turkish creationist. And just went from there. And then, of course, you have, the Saudis and the whole conference for science in the Quran, and it went from there. And so basically it is an attempt to vindicate the efficacy and truth of Islam by means of scientific miracles or miraculous scientific foreknowledge in the Quran.
So let's go item by item. What are some samples? Give us a best of, and stop spamming, and Godless, if you have anything to add, please chime in. What are some examples of the things that they come up with? I mean, I imagine that most people are already familiar with at least some of them, but go ahead and hit us with some of them. By the way, before anyone asks, I know that we advertised that we would have a Muslim apologist guest. He seems to be running a little bit late, so we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt and see if he shows up later on in the show. Okay, so what kind of prophecies or scientific miracles or what have you are we looking at?
Yeah, I think one of the most known miracle claims that are becoming actually like part of Islam now, becoming part of the doctrine, like the claim of the sea barrier and the development of the embryo, and the one about the mountain being a rawasi to stable the earth. So those are like the most, I mean, every time you speak with a Muslim, they will tell you the same three claims.
Well, I would say that some others, but have been developed so far now that they are actually impacting dictionaries, that the expanding universe, this Musiyun, is now actually being copied into dictionaries, where a guy who does not speak or did not speak Arabic changed the Arabic dictionary. So I think that's wonderful. It also shows the futility of this whole thing, because I remember the old ones 10, 15 years ago still used to say the steadily expanding universe. And then when they found out that it was not steadily expanding but accelerating, some took it out, some didn't. So you still see the remnants of the old ones still saying it's steadily expanding, which is nonsense, because they don't keep up with science which is up to date.
So, what about the barrier of the seas? Some people have said that that's what, the picnic line or something like that? Run us through that one. Let's go back,
come
let's
on,
go back
this is
to Klingschor.
absolute nonsense. I've made a video on this. I've shown that this is ridiculous. You cannot just say that the meeting sees equals pycnocline. What people are simply not realizing is they're not doing their homework. They're not looking at what anything is. They are saying, okay, I've got the pycnocline. What about the halocline, the chemocline, the thermocline, and all the other clines that we have? These are just layers. They are temporary barriers. Yes, the people use the word barriers. Now, if you look at the thermodynamics of water and you look at the air, you have very, very, they're so similar. So if you look at a warm front, a cold front, if you look at clouds, if you look at rain clouds, if you look at a thunderstorm, the same thing happens in the water. So you could also say that there are barriers in the air because air has some characteristics, the density, the humidity, the speed, temperature. Everything is different, and the same thing happens in the water. So this is nonsense. All you need to do is just look at the water, look at water masses, and then you take a practical example. Because in 1992, the freighter capsized and released 30,000 rubber ducks. Now, these ducks have been found all over the world. If there were barriers, they wouldn't have been able to go anywhere, but they're found anywhere. So this is total, absolute ridiculous nonsense, which I don't understand how it is still being fabricated. I have no idea why.
Does anyone have the actual verses about the barrier of the seas handy?
Yeah, sure. Which one do you want?
All of them. Anyone? I mean, what are they? Let's take a look at what the verses are that are being extrapolated to mean.
Okay. Well, you have Furqan, which is 25, and there you have sentence number 53. It is he who has given independence to the two seas, though they meet, one palatable sweet, the other one saltish bitter, and has set a bar and a forbidden ban between them. This is salt and sweet water. Mm-hmm. Then you have 2761. Is he not best who made the earth a fixed abode, yeah, my foot, and placed rivers in the folds thereof? I mean, this is one-on-one from Hindu and Sumerian creationism. And placed firm hills therein, and hath set a barrier between the two seas. Then you have in 55, 19 and 20, he hath loosed the two seas, they meet, there is a barrier between them. So this is what they're saying, and these are the main ones that have anything on the water meeting with a barrier.
Yeah. So I mean, it's clear that it's trying to say that there's some sort of barrier between fresh water and salt water. But yes, the pycnocline is something completely different, right?
Right. The one is talking. Well, okay, we need to differentiate here. Is it what we are understanding? Scripture? Is it a model? Is it allegorical, or is it literal? Now, if you look at the whole thing literally, then yes, absolutely. Then you mix salt and sweet water, and there should be a barrier between them, like between water and oil. And we all know that that doesn't happen. The second thing is, are we talking about water masses? Are we talking about different oceans? What are these oceans? I mean, in my eyes, he's just talking about the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, where there's land in between them. I mean, the water levels have changed and fluctuated. So the Strait of Hormuz, for example, it might well have been dry at some stage. And maybe this is what people are referring to. Who knows? We have no idea, because it's vague and ambiguous.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a comment exchange with a Muslim once, and he said something along these lines. And I said, look, there's no barrier at the mouth of a river between and the sea. It's just the direction of the flow and the fact that the salt can't travel upstream. And I told him, look, if you're standing at your sink and you turn on the tap and you fill up your sink and you plug in the bottom so you have a sink full of tap water, and then you mix a bunch of Kool-Aid mix in there and stir it up so you have a sink full of Kool-Aid, if you turn the tap back on, do you think that the Kool-Aid is going to travel up the faucet through your pipes and turn a whole reservoir of your city's drinking water into Kool-Aid? Yeah, there's no barrier. It's just the hydrodynamics 101. So what about the mountain one? The mountains holding down the land or preventing earthquakes. What are the verses there? Anyone have them ready?
Sure, give me a moment.
Yeah, there are so many verses that mention the mountain being Rawasi. 13:3, 15:19, 16, 15, they all mention the same thing.
But do they all mention the mountains as pigs?
Yes, and he has cast into the earth firmly set mountains, least it shift with you. So it's stabilizing the earth, and that's what Muslims claim, that this is actually a scientific fact.
I love it. I mean, first of all, just to quickly dismiss that, of course, as I'm sure you all know from, tectonics and so forth, the mountains are formed by two tectonic plates hitting one another and rupturing upwards. So how this could be construed as a peg being inserted into the earth, I don't know.
Kling, what you are doing is you are playing the Muslim apologist, the miracle seekers game. It is much easier. There are 5 different ways that mountains are created. This is only one of them. And the whole thing is already gone, because how can a volcanic mountain be considered a peg? And it's dead in the water. It's already gone. You can dismiss it immediately.
I mean, also, this whole claim that to steady the earth, I mean, good job, Allah. Yeah. Japan, very mountainous. Yeah, did a good, works there, keeps the earth quite steady. Peru, very, Chile. Chile is a very steady country. Look at the Andes Mountains. They do a fantastic job. Oh, California and the Rockies. Yeah, the Rockies. Yeah, San Francisco is the place to be if you want solidity and firmness and not shaking. Yeah, it really works. Good job, Allah. Here, round of applause.
Yeah.
Okay, you forgot to say irony off.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty funny. I mean, you try to tell them that mountains in some cases are the product of earthquakes and similar activity and not a creation specifically to prevent them, and as a matter of fact, it makes things worse, because if you have the weight of a mountain's right on the fault line, it just takes that much more energy when the zipper of the tectonic plates snag against each other. It takes that much more energy to finally break, chip off the edge of that plate to finally move. So, I mean, if anything, mountains aren't preventing earthquakes, they're making them worse. If you have 2 plates that were to meet at a place that is mostly just loose sediment, then the friction is accommodated. But if you have I forget, I'm not a geologist, I forget the kind of rock, igneous rock formations, is that right? If you have those meeting, then obviously it's gonna, a much greater degree of tension is needed to break those brittle elements against one another. So what's the third one? The third one that Godless was saying that is
embryology.
I'm sorry?
Embryo development.
Oh, Jesus.
Can I destroy that in like 1 minute?
Not the embryos again.
No, because this is actually remarkably easy, I think. Essentially, all you have to do is look at what does the Quran actually say. It says nutfa, which is semen. Then we have alaka, which can be a clinging thing or a leech or a blood clot, right? Then we've got mudga, which is sort of like formed, whatever. Then we've got bones, flesh, and then woohoo, you're done. I mean, this step by step, this is stuff that the Bedouins, that the Arabs could have figured out on their. We don't even need the Greeks. I mean, ignore the fact for a moment that every single step we can find in the Greek embryological works. Nutfa. Gee, did Muhammad know about semen? How could he have known? No, there is no. It's a miracle. In the 7th century of Arabia, only 4 people knew about the existence of semen. I am Adnan Rashid, historian, University of London. I mean, come on, of course. Yeah, he probably knew about semen when he was having sex with, his 11 wives and his concubines? Okay, well, so Muhammad probably knew about semen. Boom, next one. Alaka. A blood clot. When someone has an abortion, in early stages, it can look like a very bloody thing. So it's not a miracle that he said, blood clot, because it's something that he could have easily observed. Or if it just means clinging thing, hey, guess what? Do you think the Arabs hunted? No. The Arabs were all vegetarian, weren't they? They were all, in all of Arabia, only 14 people were eating meat at the time. I am Adnan Rashid, historian. No. Of course. They were hunting animals, and they could have easily, and this is the more logical explanation rather than God told them, an Arab simply killed a pregnant gazelle, and then, oh, look at this little thing. It's a little sticky thing on the inside. No miracle for clinging thing or for blood clot. Or if it's like a clinging thing, like, oh, it clings to the embryo, to the uterus, or big whoop, same thing. All you had to do was find one prey. Do you think that someone that Muhammad knew, or someone that Muhammad knew, once killed a pregnant animal because they were a hunting culture, and so, oh look, or killed I mean, we have hadiths talking about how I think it was Uqba ibn Abu Mu'ayd. I believe he was killed after the Battle of Badr, when him and Al-Nadar were killed by Muhammad because they made fun of him and mocked him and met the Quran challenge and so forth. And we have hadith, all these hadiths, many hadiths, talking about how he threw a camel fetus on Muhammad.
What?
A camel fetus he threw, when Muhammad was trying to pray in Makkah, he threw a camel fetus on Muhammad. So there we go.
No wonder he was so pissed when he came back.
But the point is that they knew. So that, look, they have not a camel, I think a camel fetus or a camel uterus. Just some parts of a female camel. The point is that, look, they were cutting them open and that they knew what was inside the camels. So there you go. Not a miracle again for Allah by any means. Okay, boom. Next one. Oh, gee. Oh, and then
wait, I'm sorry. It's almost enough to make me sympathetic with Muhammad's later nerd rage that held him for the rest of his life. If during his early days people would come up, he's trying to pray, he's like, oh, someone slaps him with the uterus of a camel, then jumps away going, whoop, 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 whoop. That would get irritating in a big hurry. Did anyone read that paper that Hamza and company wrote to sort of buttress their arguments about the embryology? They said that one guy, Ibn Khalada, even though they acknowledged that he was familiar with all the information that appears, and they acknowledged that he'd met up with Muhammad, they maintained that it could not have occurred that way. He could not have gotten any of the information, no matter how vague, no matter how mutated, from Greek sources, because we can't prove that it actually came up in conversation.
Wow. I mean, there are many hadiths about Muhammad sending his companions to Harith bin Kilda. And there's actually one hadith where when the Prophet says, go ask Harith bin Kilda. So the Prophet must have asked him before, and he got good information. So that's why he recommended him to his companions.
Well, I read...
It's not that hard to, it's very easy to guess that the Prophet had conversation with Harith bin Kilda.
I'll give you a great analogy, right, that demonstrates how bloody stupid this, particularly in the science, or rather, the social science of history, or whatever practice you define history as. You do not need logically, and this just makes sense as well. This is just logical. You don't need an exact instance where it happened. So I'll give you a great example. In Norway, or is it Sweden? Just Scandinavian Viking trove. They found a Buddha. They found a beautiful jade Buddha statue in Scandinavia. Now, we don't have, even though there were trade routes running from all the way from Scandinavia to India, right, where the exact style and similar statues have been found dating from, I don't know, the 7th century or something. So even though this is identical to these statues, it is of this style and era in India, and that there were trade routes connecting India to Scandinavia, and the Vikings actually went into Russia and were trading as far as Baghdad and the Mediterranean and so forth, and were actually able to access this sort of goods, right? We don't actually have a record of this exact statue being traded to the Vikings, so of course it wasn't traded, and it must be a miracle. This is ridiculous. Is Hamza a child?
Yeah.
If you've got the source, the root, and the item at the location linked by the root, guess what? It came from the source. It wasn't the statue of the Buddha did not magically poof into existence. It was traded from India, and it was traded across Eurasia all the way to Scandinavia, where it ended up in a Viking treasure trove. The information in the Quran, which is very similar to Greek embryology, in fact, it's simplified. It is the simplified same stages, just a simplified version. There's a trade route. It was easily accessible in Egypt, in Syria, in Persia, perhaps even as far as India. This was available everywhere.
All right, now,
and that's it.
Someone in the chat has asked, how do we know that the embryology verses were there from before the Quran of Abd al-Malik? Now, the Abd al-Malik was an Umayyad Caliph, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so would anyone care to address that? Kling, I think you're pretty well versed in the different versions of the Quran that existed.
I'm not. I would be very interesting to see if it's actually in the Sana manuscripts, which. Wait, so all right, we've got the Samarkand manuscript, which is
that the Tashkent one?
Yeah, it's Tashkent, Samarkand, whatever. And the style of the calligraphy dates back at the very earliest to Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan's reign. And I have no idea actually if it's in there or not. I mean, presumably it's in there, but parts of that Quran are missing.
Yeah, I don't think it matters if it's an Abd al-Malik version or not.
Well, the thing is that if it's, I mean, even Abd al-Malik doesn't matter if it's in Uthman. If it wasn't in Uthman's Quran, then, or I mean, it's very, very possible that this verse could have been added in after Muhammad died, when the Arab Muslims had conquered the Near East, and the Quran was put together a decade or so later, that this verse was slipped in. It's sort of like the Romans will be victorious verse. I mean, the Quran was put together after the events happened, so they had access to the results. So,
Yeah, I was reading about that just recently. It wasn't until the Umayyad edition, like the original Uthman edition during the Rashid Caliphs, it was in a Kufic script, and for people who aren't, well, I mean, I think about like 90% of our audience is ex-Muslims who know this already, but for those who don't know, you know, the Kufic script is the script you see where none of the dots or vowels are put in. And later on, it was during the, when the Umayyad Caliphs had their own Quran issued, that they added in a script similar to what we see today that did have the dots and in some cases the vowels. And the amount of leeway that they gained in the process is just unfathomable. I mean, the letters, you know, without the dots, there's pairings of different consonants. And you can, whenever there was any doubt, you know, if they had any kind of agenda or if they had just made a mistake, you know, it could have gone 50-50 either way countless times. Let's see, the letters, with one dot on the top you get N, with two you get T, and those would look the same without the dots. And then you have a T sound and a TH sound that are the same. You have a D and another TH sound that are the same without the dots. You have countless things that without the dots look exactly identical in the Kufic script. So there's a lot of room to switch things around if you were of that persuasion or of that had a motive to do so.
But can I make two very general points? The first is, I don't understand why it is that so many Muslims are so adamant that they need to find any kind of justification or verification for their book. It is supposed to be the holy book by the one and only God, written personally by that God, so it must be 100% perfect. Why would any Muslim go and demand verification for something that a God made, constructed, conceived, whatever. There is no rational reason for any Muslim to do that. If they do that, they are actually doubting their own religion, which they shouldn't be doing.
Well,
the second point is that if I look at what science is, I mean, science is, especially what is his name, Nadir or somebody, what his name was, he kept on saying modern science. What the fourth is modern science? Is that the opposite of religion? There is no such thing. Modern science is stupid, because science is always modern. There is no ancient science, because modern is what keeps up to date. So science keeps up to date all the time. So there's no way that you can call it old science or something like that. So the whole concept of science is being precise, accurate, exact, observant. All it is, it's a tool. It just describes things as accurately as possible. The Quran is neither. It is not accurate. It is not precise. It is vague and ambiguous. So you cannot compare the two. So I don't understand where this whole thing comes from in the first place.
I could explain that. I think that religious believers, I think that, I mean, really, their religious belief is an emotional thing, and they seek ex post facto justifications and post hoc rationalizations to bolster their belief. And people just see science as the sort of the ultimate, you know, like, be all end all. Like, yes, and science proves it, and that's why people always, like, on ads on telly, you know, you get the lady out there in the lab coat saying, yeah, you should use this brand of detergent, because it's an appeal to science, and it works on people, because everyone goes, science, yes, science is correct, we should follow it, we should do what they say, because they know stuff. And so I think it's simply that. It's simply an appeal to science because it's an effective argument.
So what, just marketing?
Yeah, I mean, what's the ratio of the role in dawah and convincing other people, and what's the role in preaching to the what percentage, you think? What's the motive to preach to the faithful as well and try to buttress their faith or tell them what they want to hear?
Yeah, come on, using science, which is the exact opposite, doesn't make sense to me.
Well,
anyway, go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, okay, anyway. We've brought in Eric Mukherjee. What do you have for us today? Welcome to the show.
Hi. I actually wanted to talk about the Islamic Golden Age, and it's a claim that I hear a lot when I talk to the YouTube Muslim crowd, that in the Islamic Golden Age, Islam and science were one, and, you know, you owe all of your Western science to us. We invented everything, et cetera, et cetera. And it's interesting to me, like, I did some reading about it. It seems like, yes, there was a time where advances were coming out of Islamic Spain, and Baghdad was like a gigantic center of learning and so on and so forth. And there was like Harun al-Rashid's House of Wisdom, where apparently algebra was invented. I guess we owe them a lot for that. But my question is, you know, in sort of modern Islamic societies, this is not the effect that you see. Like, the scientific output of the Middle East is pretty, it's not very good. Let's put it that way. And apparently, like, around the 14th century, this like, any kind of scientific output out of the Muslim world sort of declined, and Europe kind of took over. Like, why does modern Islam not work that well with science? Like, you know, what's going on there?
I think
something changed in Islam.
Well, okay, there are a number of reasons. I mean, you know, I remember back in school, whenever we did the mile run in PE, there was this one group of hipster kids who, because they couldn't run well, they would just walk it. Because if they couldn't do well, if they couldn't finish first, they decided that rather than embarrass themselves and run as hard as they could and end up with a C grade, they'd rather just walk and get an F and not embarrass themselves. And I think that once a culture like theirs starts to fall behind, and Europe experiences this meteoric rise, I think it essentially turned a lot of them into hipsters, where they said, well, if we can't be first, we'll go a completely different direction and consider science the domain of some foreign element. You know, there's a lot of stubbornness there. And to say that science is falling, scientific progress and contributions falling behind is an understatement. I remember on PC Meyer's blog not too long ago, they showed a Saudi university that had published this thing. Okay, there's a hadith that says if a fly lands in your drink, you should submerge it entirely in the drink, because whereas one wing has the disease, the other has the cure. Now, they actually published these results and clearly doctored them and included no control, wherein they said, look, when you had a fly just on the top of a solution, it grew these harmful bacteria, and then when you submerged it, it generated some sort of an antibody. It was completely absurd. So anyone else have thoughts on this? Can I just say that there is no doubt that during the Middle Ages, the Arab-Persian Empire was the most sophisticated civilization at the time, by far. But obviously, I don't know why they keep making this, oh, we were cool back in the day, as though it really addresses anything going on in this day and age.
But is that directly because of Islam, or is that because their empire happened to include intelligent people in it, right? Like when you look at the works of like Al-Ghazali and so on and so forth, it's clear that while they were like very heavily Muslim, they aren't nearly as dogmatic or unquestioning or literalist as people like Hamza and Adnan.
No, Al-Ghazali was against philosophy and science that is not fiqh or hadith. He was against that.
Al-Ghazali is the anti-philosopher, we call him. Wrong guy. Al-Ghazali is the guy who is credited with destroying the Golden Age. I mean, that's wrong. That's crap.
Yeah.
But Al-Ghazali was the guy this is the guy who destroyed the Mu'tazila, you could say. Well, they didn't destroy them, but he really reversed the whole zeitgeist of the Middle East and got them and ended the Mu'tazila for good. After that, the Mu'tazila never gained any credence of power, and they were driven into extinction. Look, this is actually a subject that I have. This is of all the things I'm interested in. This is actually my specialty, you could say. And after all my research and all the books I've read, I can tell you, to my understanding, exactly what happened. Islam had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the rise of Arabic science. And I call it Arabic science because we have Greek science where they spoke Greek. And Greek was the lingua franca of science, ergo we say Greek or Hellenic science. And similarly, I say Arabic science because during the medieval Middle Ages, when the science rose in the Middle East, the lingua franca of the region and subsequently the language of science was Arabic. Ergo, I say Arabic science as opposed to Islamic science because Islamic science just is irritating and wrong. Essentially, first of all, there was no single golden age. The Abbasids rose, and the golden age of Arabic, they had a golden age, and then they had a silver age where the empire fractured and broke apart. I mean, if you want to tell me that dozens of petty minor states killing and fighting each other in an atmosphere where scientists' lives are constantly at risk, so that when their patrons get killed, they get killed too, and when they're constantly being accused of blasphemy and so forth, if that's a golden age, great. But then I have to say that probably World War II was the golden age of Europe. So obviously not. So that's gone. But then when the Abbasids were falling and going into the Silver Age, meanwhile in Egypt the Fatimids rose. And you have the flowering of Al-Qahira, which is Cairo. And they flourished for a bit before, declining. And then Salah al-Din Ayyubi, this is Saladin, Saladin from the Crusades. He comes to power, and I believe he just sold the Fatimid library, and there's just no more science there. Meanwhile, in Al-Andalus, when the Abbasids come to power, they slay all of the previous Umayyad dynasty, but one young prince escapes to Al-Andalus, and then over the next 100 years, him and his successors, basically they just copy the Abbasids for a bit until they're able to actually make their own science. And they have some great science for a bit. It doesn't actually, this golden period actually lasts for a very short period of time. Before then, the libraries are broken up and destroyed and burned. And then the Berbers come in from North Africa with their absolutely crazy fundamentalist Islam, where they actually force Jews and Christians to convert to Islam or die, like a precursor to the Inquisition, but the Muslim version. I mean, if you want to call that a golden age, be my guest. But then I guess we can call the Inquisition a golden age as well.
Yeah. I'm sorry. All throughout the different civilizations and different dynasties, it really depended on who was in charge. There were some caliphs that were really great patrons of learning, and then there were some who would immediately just burn the books written by the previous ones. But all things considered, it's considered a net gain after an initial period. Immediately after the Roman, the Byzantine and Persian areas are conquered, there's understandably a little gap in their development because the dust is still settling from those invasions, and you have some very conservative minds in charge. But like I said, there's this constant tug of war between more liberal and open-minded, and then more conservative, anti-secular scholastic thinkers. But as far as the ultimate decline, I don't think it can be chalked up to like a final victory for the religious conservatives alone. It was really war and politics that spelled the end of it, because during the late Abbasid period, the Muslim world had fractured into so many minor states and smaller dynasties that it suffered a similar fate as the Western Roman Empire, in that other people just kept invading: Turks, Tatars, Mongols, and so forth. As a matter of fact, the Baghdad, which was of course the beating heart of this cultural and intellectual revolution, it was sacked by a Mongol general who, when he entered the city, caused so much destruction and killed so many people. Yeah, Ulago, and he killed so many people that he himself had to leave the city and go back to his camp because he couldn't stand the stench that was prevalent throughout the city because he had killed so many people. They just tore the heart out of it. And let's face it, if you want, there's no coincidence. There's no accident today why many of the most prosperous economic nations of this day have some of the best schools and have the largest number of patents and papers. It takes money. It takes a relatively idle upper class in order to really foster an academic environment like that. And the Umayyad Spain was being retaken by the Central Europeans, and everything was in chaos. Everything was in chaos by that period. So it's understandable that that movement was derailed, and it just never really got started again.
But the interesting thing is, oh yeah, sure.
Because there's some things that haven't been mentioned yet. We cannot deny that Baghdad was at the center of this. It had a very, very high level of civilization, what we would call civilization today. Now, over those 500 years, yes, there was a real golden age, but it was Christians, it was Jews, it was all sorts of denominations. It was majority Muslim driven, but it was not driven by religion. In other words, it was not somebody reading the Quran and saying, hey, you know what, we can advance optics here because the Quran says something. No, the Arabs did advance a lot of things. The only real invention that I came across is the caterpillar pump. Everything else was just an advancement, whether it be medical, whether it be physical, it doesn't matter what, it was advancement. This carried on.
Saying that's,
sorry?
You're saying that's because they were prosperous and they were stable? Is that why?
No, they were keen on research. They were keen on scientific research instead of just going into belief. They were looking at different areas of science that already existed in those days, and they pushed them to the limits until in 1249, when Kaiser Friedrich, the emperor, died. He protected this. because he was also very keen on science. When he died, this protection ceased, and the Catholic Church took over because they saw knowledge as a threat to their superiority. So what they did then, they confiscated all the instruments, all the scientific laboratories that they had, and then chucked out all the Muslims, took the books, translated them into Latin, destroyed the originals, kept the knowledge for themselves, and effectively Muslims then went back home and went back into their religion and were sulking. That is the end of that era. What happened to the Christian and Jewish Arabs that went? I have no idea what happened to them.
We're keeping Eric on, and we've brought in Ladini Mons, who he has to go soon, so I thought I'd give him time to come in and ask his question or make his comment. It's also dealing with our original topic of science in the Quran.
Okay, am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay. I was going to talk about two subjects. One is about the flat earth in the Quran, and the second is the development of the embryo. Okay?
Okay.
The first thing is about the surahs and ayahs which describe the flat earth in the Quran, which is in Surah 18, Surah 18, verse 84, which is Surah Al-Kahf, which is talking about Zulqarnain, which is described by Islamic scholars and interpreters as Alexander the Great. Okay, it's talking about his journeys to the east and west, the furthest east and the furthest west, and going to the place where the sun sets and the place where the sun rises, مطلع الشمس and مغربها in Arabic, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a verse which clearly indicates that Muhammad thought that the earth is flat and there is a place in which the sun rises from and a place where the sun sits upon, you know. Surah 18, I will just read the verses to make sure that you get it right.
Uh-huh.
It's Surah 18 verse 86, which is حتى إذا بلغ مغرب الشمس وجدها تغرب في عين حمئة ووجد عندها قوما قلنا يا ذي القرنين إما أن تعذب وإما أن تتخذ فيهم حسنا. Till when he reached the setting place of the sun, he found it sitting in a muddy spring and found the people thereabout. We said, "Oh, Zulqarnain, either punish or show them kindness." So the word in Arabic describing the place Zulqarnain allegedly saw the sitting place of the sun is called wajada, and the same verb is used to describe the people he found thereabout. So Islamic interpreters who said that he thought that the sun is going to sit into the ocean is actually wrong, because the same word is used to describe his seeing of the sun and also seeing the people around that. Also a verse in that surah, which is verse 90, حتى إذا بلغ مطلع الشمس وجدها تطلع على قوم لم نجعل لهم من دونها سترا. Till when he reached the rising place of the sun, he found it rising on a people for whom we had appointed no helper therefrom. So it's actually describing the place from which the sun rises, and describes a people around that place, which he describes them as they have no shelter, they have no protective place from the sun, because if you imagine the place from the sun rise from, it's gonna be hot, it's gonna be destructive. And some interpreters of the Quran tell stories about an army which the sun rises upon from in this place, that the whole army was distracted because of the powerful destructive sun rising from that place. Okay, another verse is one moment, which is talking about the sun, which is talking about the sun, which is running to a place to prostrate under the Rahman Arsh, which is throne, under the Rahman, under Allah's throne. The verse is in Surah. One moment, please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like how. I'm sorry. I just like how this little Qarnayn is able to travel to the farthest point west and the farthest point east, and he never says he took a boat. That was the first thing that struck me. He doesn't. There's no Americas in the Quran.
Anyway. Yeah. The story about Zulkarnain is that the Jews allegedly asked Muhammad about this important character in history at that time, and challenged the Prophet to tell them about this man, and that's the way he got it. He a man who have a great power, and traveled to the furthest east point, where the sun rises from, and the farthest west, where the sun sits in that place. So Muhammad got it completely wrong. Another verse in the Quran is Surah Yasin, which is Surah 36. And ayah verse 38, which says in Arabic, وَالشَّمْسِ تَجْرِي لِمُسْتَقَرٍ لَهَا ذَلِكَ تَقْدِيرُ الْعَزِيزِ الْعَلِيمِ. And the sun runs onto a resting place for him. It's actually translated wrongly in this translation I'm using. The correct translation should be, and the sun runs onto a resting place for it, not for him, because this translation actually indicates that the sun is resting in a place for God, but actually resting in a place for it. The Shams Tagri, the Mustaqar Laha, to it, not for him. So
wait, isn't Shams feminine?
Is it Shams what?
Shams, the word for sun, isn't it feminine? Or is the word masculine?
No, it's feminine.
Yeah.
No. Yes.
Okay, so yeah, so there's no room for confusion. It wouldn't say. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Interrupt.
Yes. If it was for Allah, it would say the verse would say "Ash-shams tajri mustaqarrin lahu," not for laha. Laha is for feminine, as you said. So an authenticated hadith for Muhammad says. Do you know where the sun goes when it sits allegedly on the muddy spring? Which yes. Do you know where the sun goes when it sits? And the people asked where. He said it runs to prostrate under God's throne. So the sun is actually has a resting place, has a rising place, and when it rests, it goes to prostrate and pray under God's throne. So Muhammad.
Yeah, what is under the throne? Under the throne you have water, and that's why they are swimming along in the water.
Yeah. Arsh Rahman ala al-ma, but it's actually the word God's throne. It's on water is describing what was before the creation, or into the developing creation of the earth. The God's throne in the final judgment day would be lifted up by eight angels, as described by the Quran. وَيَحْمِلُ عَرْشُكَ يَوْمَئِذٍ ثَمَانِيَةٌ. And so God or Muhammad got it completely wrong.
Yeah, I mean, yes. First of all, 2 points. With Dhul Qarnayn, this is actually, this is something that I've written an essay about, and it's something that very much interests me. We can trace the story of Dhul Qarnayn from the 1st century, from like Pliny and so forth, relating stories about, well, ahistorical stories about Alexander the Great, all the way through its development, through Josephus and through Pseudo-Callisthenes and so forth, all the way to the Quran. And we can see how the story evolved. And it is a flat earth story. In this story, which the Quran has repeated almost exactly to the detail, it's the precise exact story. Alexander the Great, who was known as the two-horned one, Dhul Qarnayn, and who traveled from, who was depicted with literal horns in the Alexander Romance story of the Byzantines as it had developed, travels to the very easternmost end of the world, where, or travels to the edge of the world, like the edge of the world, where the sun rises and where these people who are, scared of the rising sun because it's so hot because the sun is so close to the earth, and he travels to the place where the sun sets, where there's a fetid water or a fetid sea, and then in Central Asia he builds a gigantic wall of brass and iron in order to keep out the evil tribes and hordes of Gog and Magog. The precise exact story in every detail is from pre-Islamic stories which we can trace its development. And in that story, the earth is flat. So the Quran is repeating as fact a flat earth, a story in a flat earth cosmology, and it is repeating the flat earth aspects of that story. And then we also, just on the note of, with the science failures in the Quran, it also just demonstrates another problem with the whole science in the Quran miracle shtick. I mean, if you can look at verses and extrapolate on them that they're correct, can't you also do the opposite? Can't I just look at a verse and go, I don't know, just any verse, and say, aha, and this is an error because Muhammad was referring to, I don't know, some incorrect belief that was once believed that now is not believed?
Flat Earth.
I mean, no. Flat Earth is got a lot of, is well-founded. Let's just, well, actually, yes. I mean, look, just take the flat Earth. Like, if, like, for example, take the atmosphere miracle. If the evidence for the atmospheres in the Quran is conclusive, it therefore follows that my evidence for a flat Earth in the Quran is conclusive, because the verses that say the Earth is laid out flat, and and Dhul Qarnayn and so forth, that's much more convincing and relevant evidence for the Earth being flat than there is evidence that the Quran refers to, I don't know, electric guitars or whatever. So if you're going to accept that the Quran really does predict quasars and advanced biology and all stuff, then why don't you also accept that the Quran has a flat Earth? Because the evidence for a flat Earth in the Quran is much clearer than any evidence for any other science miracle.
Yes, actually, people at the time of Muhammad accused him of reiterating the fables of old men, or men of old, which is Asatir al-Awwalin in Arabic. A lot of verses in the Quran clearly indicate that the kuffar accused Muhammad of reiterating these stories, which they heard before, and they weren't convinced that these stories are a revelation from God. So they said to him, "You are just reiterating these stories," which also said that these stories, which we have now, the complete version of it, tell us the development of these stories onto the Quran. Actually, the story of Zulkarnain, when you read it in the Quran, you can't understand why Zulkarnain traveled east and west. And what is the point of all the story? What's the point? You can't understand because a little bit is mentioned in the Quran. So if you want to understand the whole story of these verses, you must go to another sources which tell you the whole story. So interpreters of the Quran were actually aware of that. So they compiled stories from Jews, from Christians, and from people of Quraysh, which is Wasaniyin, to understand what is the Quran actually is telling, because it is ambiguous. It has no point. If you read the story in the Quran, you can't understand anything. It's like you cut or you compile a piece of story which has no point at all, you know?
Mm-hmm. You know, I read this just the other day. There's a lot of verses like these, but I read one in particular. It said, okay, they will say, this is from the Quran, it says, they will say, this person who says he's the prophet, people just of a foreign land in a different language, they come and they dictate things, and then they recite them to him, and then he claims that it's revelation. And then the next verse reads, tell them, no, he gets this information from he who knows the secrets of heaven and the earth, for he is the most forgiving, the most merciful. So here you have God speaking through Muhammad, addressing critics who are saying, Muhammad is talking to people who know all these stories, and then the very next minute he's claiming that these stories are revealed to him, and we're just not buying it. And God's response to them is, tell them, nuh-uh. I mean, why even address the criticism unless you have some sort of litmus test to show that yours is different? I mean, why, if that's your plan, I don't understand why he didn't just, I mean, he by he, I mean God. Why didn't God just ignore them? It's amazing to come back and have no argument other than to say, nah, he's getting it from God, and God is awesome. In case you forgot. I'm going to let Eric go for now. Thank you for coming in, Eric. I'm going to rotate in another guest. Take care. And remember, if anyone wants to call in, just send a Skype contact request to the Gin and Tonic Show, and we will bring you on when we're ready to have you. And of course, we always welcome counterpoint. If any Muslim guests want to come on, don't worry, we won't gang up on you. I think you can watch the other shows if you're feeling a sense of trepidation about coming on. We don't endeavor to gang up on our people who come on and have the courage to argue an opposing side. We fight for your right to be heard and speak your piece. Okay, so we brought in Frank. Frank, are you here?
Okay.
And Ladini, we'll let you finish.
Okay. I would like to talk about another thing, which is the development of the embryo. I watched a lot of episodes of the Gin and Tonic Show about a Muslim apologist called Hamza Zortis, or whatever the name. He published a paper which is called Embryology in the Quran, which I happened to read to just see what he has to say. So in page 13, which he tries to lingo analysis the Arabic word of the Quran, which is called the nutfa. He says the following. 1 minute, please. By looking at the Arabic language, it can mean a dribble, a trickle, a drop of semen. Nutfa can also mean a singular entity which is a part of a bigger group of its kind. Therefore, a nutfa could be a single sperm from a collection of millions of sperms contained in semen, or a single female egg from a group of many other eggs in the ovaries. According to prophetic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad explains the nutfa as a combination of liquids from a male nutfa and a female nutfa. Okay, he actually misquoted what Muhammad said in his saying from a male nutfa and from a female nutfa. The hadith actually says, one moment please, it says the following. In Sahih Muslim, the Prophet is trying to describe how a boy or a girl resembles its father or its mother. He says, if the fluid of the man precedes the fluid of the woman, the boy or the girl, whatever, the son will resemble his uncles. And if the woman fluid precedes the man fluid, he will resemble his cousins. So Muhammad actually got it very wrong, and Hamza here is misquoting the hadith of Muhammad. He doesn't say a nutfa of man or a nutfa of woman. Another thing is in his definition of the word nutfa, he says, it also means a singular entity which is a part of a group of its kind. And it's actually wrong. If you go to the Arabic dictionary, Lisan al-Arab, it says, one moment please, النطفة أو النطافة قليل من الماء. So the word nutfa in Arabic only means water. It cannot be a mingled fluid. He is misquoting Arabic dictionaries. Also in Al-Ayab al-Zakhir, which is an Arabic dictionary, a nutfa is ماء الصافي, clear water. If it is so if I go in his trying to in his lingo analysis of the Arabic words of the Quran, he's misquoting the verses, he's misquoting the Arabic definition of them, and he is trying to play with Arabic words to achieve his goal, which is trying to say that the Quran contains miracles, scientific miracles. Another word which is also used by many apologetics, which is the word alaqa. And they are completely disregarding all the exegesis, classical exegesis of the Quran, and saying that this word actually means a thing which clings. But when we go to Arabic dictionaries, Arabs also know that the word they were naming the woman which is pregnant, the pregnant woman, they were naming it alukan, which is a woman, alaka with the child, and any female is aluk in Arabic. So the word is actually used by Arabs in that time to describe the pregnant women, aluk from alaka. So it has no actual scientific miracles, because the same word was used in classical Arabic to describe the pregnant woman. So either way, if you are going to agree with the interpreters that it is a congealed blood, or are you going to try to misquote or try to play with words and give it a meaning of a thing which clings? The classical Arabic, the classical Arabic actually names the pregnant woman Aluk, which is derived from the word alaqa. So it comes to no surprise if Muhammad used it in his Quran and to describe the embryo. It was his culture, and it actually is a wrong description. If you read the interpretations, which they all agree to be congealed blood.
Yeah, I think we're all getting tired of not just Hamza Sources, but I think Muslim apologists in general. They're very quick to not just hide behind the fact that most people worldwide don't speak Arabic, but they'll ascribe these attributes to the Arabic language that are just so, like every word contains unlimited possibilities to mean whatever they want. I mean, we're used to this even if you're talking to a religious person who's reading just an English text, because in addition to deciding this word means that word means this, they can say that either before or after this sort of makeover has taken place. They can say, well, maybe back in the day, this was really a colloquialism or a euphemism for something completely different, and it's just some saying, even if they have no other base of reference to say so. Who really drove me up the wall was Hamza Yusuf. Are you guys all familiar with him?
Yep.
Yeah. What a lying weasel that guy is. He claims to be very knowledgeable about the different dialects of Arabic, and he reads the verse about the wife beating. It says, okay, if you suspect your wife is rebelling, scold her, banish her to the couch, and if that doesn't work, then beat her. And I've never heard someone tell so many lies in such a short space of time. If you can look up the clip of him addressing that issue, you will, if you haven't seen it already, you will just be face palming through the entire thing. It's just lie after lie after lie. He says, that's not what this means. This verb is, he says, okay, well, this verb, it applies to both men and women, even though, Arabic specifically has a conjugation for two people, and it's clearly not used in that case. And then he says, well, this means both of them, even though it says, if she doesn't obey you, and it's third person singular feminine, and then the man should beat her, and it's in third person singular masculine. Just lie after lie after lie he tells about what it actually means. But the cherry on top of the bullshit sundae was when he took the word that says and beat her, he said, that's not what it means. It doesn't mean to strike. It means to assume an arrogant posture.
These are white lies, though.
Anyway, we've also brought in Frank. Thank you for joining us. You had some comments about scientific miracles. Frank was really ready to go. He was doing the Rocky montage, ready to confront Nadir Ahmed, and then Nadir, it seems, was unable to attend. So sorry, Frank. There's nothing we can do about that.
Fortunately, that's like the normal cowardice that happens. Very rarely do they debate people. I mean, at least here in the Middle East, in the Arabic-speaking countries, they usually just have their imaginary debates with strawmen, and they think they win that imaginary debate. Anyways, I've gathered some from there are a couple of websites that are dedicated to collecting these so-called Quranic miracles. One of them is actually heavily funded by the Saudi government. It's based in Saudi Arabia. It's called the it's called the International Commission for Scientific Science in the Quran and Sunnah, and they have 196 miracles. I picked a few of them randomly. One of them mentions a verse in about Zachariah, the biblical prophet, and that God tells him that he will have a child, and then he tells God that his hair has whitened, and that his bones have weakened, and then they write this lengthy, tiresome, like jargon-filled scientific paper, and then at the end they say that the miracle here is that it's about osteoporosis. Osteoporosis. And then this is a really funny one. There is a verse in the Quran in Surah At-Takwir. It says فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِالْخُنَّسِ الْجَوَارِ الْكُنَّسِ, which the old tafsirs say this is about the stars fading during the day and then reappearing at night. But the new the miracle in it is that it's about black holes that suck stars and everything. But the funny thing about it is that they use the word kunnas. Kunnas, we used to use it for a miknasa. Miknasa means a broom, right? So a broom is that sweeps things aside, like stars going aside during the night and then moving from over the sky. So the word for a vacuum cleaner, the same word was adopted for a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah.
And then now they use the word for a vacuum cleaner as a black hole. So can you imagine that? And then also you have another one here that says that polytheist, but like probably a specific one, but one of them, I think Ibn al-Mughira, ناصية كاذبة خطأ, which means that he will be dragged from the hair on the front of his head. And they wouldn't say that that the Quran says this because this is like a most humiliating act that can be done in the culture of Arabia. They said that because the frontal lobe is located there, and this is another scientific miracle. Anyways, one of the stuff that I gathered for Nadir Ahmed is that any claim that you would hear from these so-called scientific miracles always have these one or more of these four criteria. So one, they take the verse out of its historical, cultural, or scriptural context, and then they would warp the verse to make it fit with modern science, or do the opposite, warp the scientific findings to make them fit. And always the knowledge that they find is never useful. It's always retroactively found. And then you will never find God saying, oh, beware of germs, wash your hands before and after, whatever. There's nothing useful in it. It's always baloney. And then they keep repeating. But there's something I think is worth mentioning that you guys didn't touch on. It's the fact that there are, you probably know that the educated Muslims, people who are studied science properly, usually refute. They don't accept these claims, and they find them contrary to Islam. But there's also one thing which I found, which is interesting, rather surprising. Ibn Uthaymeen, who was one of the staunch hardline Wahhabists, he died 10 years ago or so. He actually says that I will read what he writes here. It's in Arabic. I will translate. It says, the interpretation of Quran with scientific theories has its perils. That is, if we interpret the Quran with those theories, and then other theories came and that are contradictory to the previous theories, that would mean that the Quran is incorrect in the eyes of the enemies of Islam. And then he goes on, and then he says, and then he says, the Quran is not a scientific book. It is a book for worship, morals, and contemplation. All right, and then he goes on, and this is common probably among all the real strict Wahhabists. They don't think, and I think I mean his opinions are correct, that new scientific theories may come and alter probably the meaning of some previous knowledge, just as because they learn from the lessons of previous Muslims who have done the same thing before. And obviously you guys touched on the way they changed the meanings of the definitions of words, and they invent new meanings that have never been in any dictionary. One of them is dahaha, about the earth being round, which always means made flat, but they changed the whole meaning. And then And there's one other thing. It is not always harmless. It's not always just claims that are baseless. So, there are now businesses. There are now, one of them is called Abdul Basit Al-Sayyid, who claims to have doctorates in, I forgot, like 12 different fields of medicine. Of course, I think it's utter bullshit. But he sells these herbal medicines, which he claims that are based on science in the Quran and the Sunnah. And probably he makes millions, especially from gullible, probably sick people who he takes advantage of, mainly in the Gulf region, the rich Gulf region. And much to my surprise, also he was once received by the king here, and then also he shook hands, and it's just so there is harm in it. And then also there's the way that many Muslims buy it, and that also leaves terrible impact on how they understand science, on what they think of it. Like science becomes I don't know, warped to them. And then, yeah, one last thing also is that, what was it? I forgot. Anyways, I'll let you guys go on. Sorry about that.
Yeah, well, if you want to make the perfect tonic, if you want to make the perfect tonic based on the hadith, okay, you take some water from the well of Zamzam, then you put in some honey, then you crush 7 ajwa dates and put the extract in there. And then it should cure you of everything for 24 hours.
You forgot camel piss.
Oh, yeah, camel piss. You have to put in the camel piss as dictated in the Sunnah by the Prophet. And the other thing, honey. Yeah, honey also. What was the other? Oh, yeah, you have to submerge a fly in it and then pull it out. And then you have the perfect, ideal Sunnah water that will cure everything. And it'll also protect you from witchcraft for the next 24 hours.
Actually, just a couple of years ago, there were a Muslim doctor who was defending the piss camel. They say it's actually beneficial and everyone should drink it once in a while.
Has anyone ever
like on TV? National TV.
Has anyone ever actually seen a camel piss?
Yeah.
It's disgusting because their bodies are so efficient at storing water that it looks like syrup, like you'd put on pancakes. It's just so thick and dark and gooey. Okay, well, on that note, Ladini and Frank, thank you for joining us. I'm going to let you both go, and we're going to be...
okay, now, Nadir Ahmed, he claims that he got the times mixed up, but he's now online, so would you like me to add him to the call? Or...
Yes, please.
All right. One moment as I verify this. Okay. Give me a moment.
Okay, do I need to call him? I think I do. Hello there.
Just one second, let me turn on my speakers. I think my speakers are off.
Okay. Well, you wouldn't have heard me say that just now.
Okay. Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes. Thank you for coming on.
I'm so sorry about this. That whole GMT time I got mixed up, and I was actually going to wake up around 2:45 a.m. tonight.
Oh, it's no problem.
I apologize about that, guys.
It happens. That's fine. So, okay, so if you just got here, I imagine you didn't catch anything else. We'll have to reenact the entire first hour of the show for Nadir.
That was so bad.
It's fine. It's fine. It happens.
Don't worry. I've missed the first half of the show before as well, so you're not alone.
Okay, so Nadir, give us a brief introduction of. Tell us about yourself, about the website you run, and the argument that you maintain about science in the Quran.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just to kind of give you a brief synopsis, I'll just take a couple of minutes. Yeah, I think if you look at the scientific evidence in the Quran, what I mean by that are statements which agree with science, which are mentioned in the Quran. You know, there can be no other natural, there's really no natural explanation for it. Only a supernatural explanation exists. And I have debated many atheists and agnostics and people like that, and nobody is able to refute the scientific evidence for the Quran. And I even challenged people like Answering Islam, Faith, Freedom, these anti-Islamic websites to debate and discuss this with me, but really no one has been able to do so. And I've already heard all your arguments against it. I've read all these websites, and it's really, these are basically false arguments. And that's the reason why I wanted to come on this show, to help clarify the misunderstanding. And really, I think what the problem is, people like yourself and on the show, you don't understand the arguments for Quran and science. And I think hopefully I could fill that gap.
Okay. Well, then let's just, do you want to plug your site by name before we continue?
Oh yeah, my website is examinethetruth.com, and I have been having debates, dialogues with mostly Christians for the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that when you spar with Christians that they try to match you miracle for miracle with scientific predictions in the Bible?
No, actually what I find is that they mostly run away from debating. I see that they cannot really defend the Bible, and really I'm at a point where I can't find a Christian who wants to discuss the evidences with me. And it's not just Quran and science, but on various topics. So the good thing about atheists is they don't run away like the Christians do.
Now, okay, so let's get right into it. What do you think is the most compelling instance of scientific accuracy, not necessarily prediction, in the Quran?
Atheismo, can I ask my first question, maybe possibly, because I think this is a better intro. Nadir, hi. If you say that there is evidence in science, in modern science, for the sentences in the Quran, why do you think you need evidence for the sentences in the Quran?
Why do I think I need it? Oh, that's the whole thing. I didn't think I needed it, but it's there, so we have to do something with it. We have to understand it. And I hope that answers your question.
Okay, it says we should reflect, we should look at reality, but it doesn't say anywhere that we should go and look for evidence for this, because the Quran itself is evidence.
Well, let's go along with your argument. Let's hypothetically say in the Quran, do not correlate the Quran with science. Let's just hypothetically say it says that. That still doesn't change my argument. Hypothetically,
sorry, I don't hear you anymore.
Well, stop. Remember, we don't want to let him finish before you come back, please.
Is this me or is this his microphone? I cannot understand anything.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's a little bit of distortion. I'm able to understand.
Yes, I can understand.
Yeah.
I'll try to speak closer to my microphone. I don't know if that will help.
I think it's fine. A little bit. The quality's a little bit low, but it's not so bad that it's not as bad as our last guest. You should have heard. I don't know if you heard him.
Yeah. Just to answer your question, hypothetically, if I were to become a Christian or an atheist, my argument will not change. My argument is simply this: that I can't find a natural explanation for the plethora of verses in the Quran which agree with modern science. And not only that, but prophecies which have come in true, and there is no natural explanation for it.
Okay, so you're not looking at this as evidence per se. You are saying it's just, well, they coincide.
What the argument which I'm putting forward is there are many verses in the Quran where you see that he has used a choice of words which happen to agree with modern science. Yes.
Okay. If you say modern science, what is modern science?
Scientific discoveries, which was just discovered, let's say, in the last 50 years or even 100 years. And that information did not exist 1,400 years ago.
So you are saying modern science is anything that has been discovered recently within the last century or so?
Right, and that information did not exist 1,400 years ago.
Okay, all right, I'll take it as that. All right, then can you give me an example?
Sure. In fact, let me go back and address the first person, because he actually asked a question. He's like, what do you think is like the greatest scientific miracle in the Quran? Or something like that. Did I understand your question correctly, whoever was the person? Which I forgot your name, whatever it was.
Almighty Atheismo.
I'm sorry, what's your name?
No, Almighty Atheismo was the one who asked that, and yes, just tell what is the single greatest, most powerful, awesome, mega epic Quran miracle?
Yeah, and that's kind of the reason why I'm on this show, because by asking me that question, that shows that you guys really don't understand what is the argument for Quran and science. So let me go and answer that question. The answer is really nothing. If you look at the Quran, you'll find many verses which agree with science. But just looking at the individual one is not impressive, because it could. Well, let me just finish my point here.
Yeah.
It could be a coincidence. Maybe he meant something else by those statements. So if you look at the individual statement in itself, no. But what happens is that when you see it happen again and again and again and again, that is impressive. That is where you cannot find an answer for it. Okay? So really, I could show you many examples of where the Quran agrees with science, but what I want you guys to understand is that individual occurrence is not impressive. Okay, so let me just go ahead and give you one example.
Okay.
And I think you guys were debating this. I saw your show, so I've heard and understand your refutations, so I'll also respond to that.
All right.
Chapter 55, verse 20, okay, 19 through 20, it clearly says that there are barriers in the seas. Okay, now science today tells us the exact same thing, that there are barriers in the sea, and it's called
Stop, let him come back. There's a person.
No, come on. I mean, if the premise is wrong, we need to sort out the premise right here and now, because this is false.
I understand. Just let him get out the entire argument. By the way, Nadir, I'm not sure. There's a person on a panel named Stop. So when I'm saying stop repeatedly, I'm not telling you to stop. I'm telling Stop, shut up.
All right.
So please continue. We get a little anxious sometimes. Sorry about that.
Okay. Okay. And so yeah, that's chapter 55, verse 20, which I quoted, and the other guy can respond. So science clearly says, in fact, I've documented it on my website, it states exactly what the Quran states. It says that let me just read to you what the book which I'm quoting out of, and then I'll let the other guy speak. It says, in the seas where the pycnocline is a distinct feature, for example, in the Baltic Sea and the fjords in the Nordic seas, it is a barrier which prevents deep water from mixing with surface water. Okay, go ahead.
I don't understand. You are saying the pycnocline is what? A barrier?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and the thermocline?
The thermocline, yeah, I believe that could be viewed as a barrier, yeah.
And the chemocline?
Well, no, I don't know about the chemocline. I don't know.
And the halocline? Come on, how many clines are there that are barriers? They are not barriers. They are phenomena. They are just instances of like air movement. I don't know if you've seen a hot front or a cold front, if you've seen a thunderstorm, if you've seen clouds. This is the same characteristics. Water has different characteristics. It does not mean anything. It just means this is the definition of a characteristic of water. Now, you are saying it's a barrier. Now, what that means I don't know what you mean by science. I mean, science doesn't exist. If we're talking about oceanography, then a barrier means it is a temporary feature that does not allow the transfer of characteristics of this water mass into another water mass. And that is it. Now, can you explain what it is that the Quran is actually, or what you are claiming what the Quran is saying?
Okay, yeah. Actually, I put on my website. Well, let me back up.
Hang on, but your website. Please don't refer to your
let him
website.
Come back. Stop. Let him come back in full.
Yeah, but hang on. He's
no,
referring to his
let
website.
Him come back in full. Stop. Come on.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, what I meant to say is that I'm sure you've probably seen this with Christians and Muslims, where they actually read the science into the Quran. The Quran is actually not talking about science, but they reinterpret it to spin science in there. I'm sure you actually have seen that happen. Well, as I have made the claim on my website, I don't do that. Rather, you guys are the ones who are going to spin science into the Quran. My claim is you guys, as we see forward, are going to misinterpret science into the Quran, and you're going to misinterpret what science says so that you can make the Quran not agree with science. So now what we
why we invited you here to clarify this, and this is why I'm asking the question, what is the claim?
Now what you did, you basically reinterpreted science to make it fit what you wanted. Now I'm quoting, now let me quote to you again, okay? It says, and I have several references, and I mean you could just type barrier and picnic line and in Google, and you will find many websites, authoritative websites, which calls it a barrier. But today, as you can see now, he's not calling it a barrier. Do you see how he's twisting science to make it mean what he wants to? Let me repeat. It says here, the sea where the picnic line is a distinct feature, it is a barrier. But notice how he tries to reinterpret science, change what science means to make it suit his own agenda. I don't do that. I just read straight out of the text. So go ahead. The mic is yours. Or it's your turn.
No, I asked you to tell me what you think the Quran says.
Okay, absolutely. So the first correction is there. We have to agree science does say that there are barriers in the sea. Okay? And then the Quran says that there are barriers in the sea. All right? So we do have, so this once again proves my argument tonight. Regardless of what
can you just say, what is the claim?
Well, let me finish my point here. My argument was that the Quran used a choice of words which agrees with modern science. Okay? I just told you, I don't interpret the Quran. You guys are going to interpret the Quran to read the science out of it. So when you ask me what it means, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to be quiet. My argument is we see too much occurrences of the Quran agreeing with science.
Okay, what is it? What is the barrier? What is it?
If you had more, you can go, but...
No, go ahead, please.
Oh, well, because at least the verse about the separation of the sweet and salty water, it couldn't be applying at least in that verse, right? Because that's not what the picnic line, that's not its function, right?
We are talking about chapter 55, verses 19 through 20, right? Are you referring to that?
I don't recognize them by number, but there are some that say separating the drinkable water essentially from the non-drinkable, and it's been determined that it's talking about fresh versus sea water. Now, obviously, the picnic line doesn't have anything to do with that, so at least in those cases, this can't be what it's talking about.
I think there is a picnic line inside salt and fresh water, but if you look at the verse which I'm quoting, it has nothing to do with salt and fresh water. It's not mentioned in the verse.
Well, what is the barrier in these other verses not dealing with the difference between fresh and salt water? What's the purpose of the barrier then? What waters is it separating?
Mm-hmm. Well, you do realize that let me read the verse which I'm quoting here, just so that we have a clear picture of what's being said over there. It says, he has let loose the two seas meeting together. Between them is a barrier which none of them can transgress. And I'm like, wait a second. The science tells us today that yes, there are barriers in the sea. So the verse which I'm quoting, it has nothing to do with salt and fresh water.
Okay, can I comment here? I think all verses that talks about al-Bahran refers to the same seawater, because it uses the dual form. It doesn't say there is barrier in the seas. It says there are barriers in the two seas. And the verse that's talking about the salt and sweet water is also referring to two seas. So it's the same seas in all verses.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at 35:12, it says, "And not alike are the two bodies of water. One is fresh and sweet, palatable for drinking," and to the end of the verse. So it's always referring to it as dual. It uses Bahran. So why do you think it's different?
Yeah. Okay. And if you recall, if we actually look at the verse in Arabic, let me go ahead and just read it real quick here. It's called Marajal Bahrain, and it's talking about the two seas. Once again, salt and fresh water. Last time I'll repeat this, are not mentioned in here. But even if it doesn't matter. There are picnic lines in salt and fresh water. So I'm not sure where you're going with that. So the verse which I'm quoting has nothing to do with salt and fresh water. It's not in the text.
You're suggesting that, for example, at the mouth of a river where fresh water meets salt water, there's a picnic line there?
I'm not sure where exactly in salt and fresh water, but there are picnic lines in salt and fresh water. I don't. My knowledge is not that deep on it because the verse which I'm putting has nothing to do with it.
Right, but what I'm saying is, okay, if you have, a lake and it's fresh water and a sea that's salt water, and they have individual picnic lines, that means at least the picnic line itself can't be the barrier between them, because there wouldn't be a picnic line at the mouth of a river where the fresh water flows into the sea. So even though you might have phenomena like those lines in those two respective bodies, it's not acting as a barrier between the two different types.
Yeah, I actually don't know because that's irrelevant to chapter 55, verse 19 and 20.
How do you see that? Okay, so that's the one that doesn't, in your mind, well, what do you have to say about Godless's input that it seems to be referring to these two different kinds of water in every instance?
So he's saying, I think Godless's comment was, it seems like it's referring to salt and fresh water, right?
Those were my words. He said it was.
Yeah, because he uses the dual form. It says Bahran.
Bahran is talking to the two C's. The dual is the two C's there.
Yeah, because if you want to talk... Yeah.
Okay, because if you read it, it's talking to Bahrain. It's talking about the dual there are the two C's, and that's why it's translated as two C's. But once again here, you remember what I mentioned on my website and what my claim here. I don't spin my own interpretation in the Quran. Notice how, and again, you guys can rebut me here, but notice how you guys are actually spinning your own interpretation of the Quran. You're telling me...
We are asking you. You are not giving us the... You are not answering our questions. We are giving you the chance of telling us what it is that you are thinking, and you're telling us that we are doing something else. How can you tell us what we are doing when we are not doing it? Why don't you tell us very straight what it is that you... What are the two C's? What is the barrier? Give us an example. Make your point. Instead of accusing us of something that we're not doing, why don't you make a case?
Right. Okay, well, let me go ahead and let me just finish my point here. I want to show you how, the fallacy of your argument. And this is, and like I said, I'm just showing
we have not made an
argument.
Let
him come back. Let him come back. Go ahead, Nadir.
Yeah, this is the fallacy of your argument, and like I said,
there is no argument. When are you going to listen? We have not made an argument. We are waiting for your case so that we can make an argument. We have not made one yet.
Let him come back. Let him say whatever he wants.
This is so frustrating.
I know. I understand your complaint. Let him come back and fall.
Yeah, see, like I said, we cannot have a discussion debate. We just keep cutting someone off. I know my words are going to sound kind of confrontative, but like I said, I've read Answering Islam. I've seen all the anti-Islamic websites. I study these arguments. I need to point out the fallacies in your argument here. Here's the problem here. Okay, what I told you here, it is always my opponent who will try to reinterpret the scripture to make it to mean what they want to, so they can read the science out of it. I don't do that. I just make an observation of the text.
Okay.
Now let me go ahead and finish, and let me address what the Arabic speaker was saying. He's saying that Bahrain, it's in the duals too. Yes. Read the translation. Every translation reads exactly like this. He has let loose the two Bahrain, the two seas meeting together. So he began to spin his own interpretation and started talking about salt and fresh water when it's actually not in the text. So I just wanted to point out.
But it was.
Yeah, it was in two different other verses. It's mentioned that Al-Bahrain are referring to the salt and sweet water.
Right, but it's not in the verse which I'm quoting you.
Well,
because it doesn't have to mention that every time it's referred to the Al-Bahrain, because it's already mentioned it before, that it's actually referring to salt and sweet water.
Yeah,
and that's why it keeps using the dual form.
Right, and do you see how he's spinning his own interpretation?
No, wait, Nadir, hold on. What he's saying is that, if early on in the conversation I list three things, and then I use relative pronouns to refer to the three things earlier, it's a pretty safe assumption that I'm just saving myself from repeating the whole list. So what Godless seems to be saying is it calls them the two C's and uses the definite article, and then later says the two C's, not a pair of C's. So it does refer in the definite sense to something that has already been established in the mind of the reader.
Mm-hmm.
I can actually give. I can
let Nadir come back every time, because he's 50% of the opinion, so he should have 50% of the time.
Okay.
Well, and you're right. You're right. See, nobody said that your interpretations are baseless. Of course, I agree with you. It's a safe assumption, but once again, that is your interpretation. You are forcing onto the text. I don't do that, and that's exactly what I wrote on my website. And this is the fallacy of all of your arguments. You are spinning your own interpretations. I just go by what the text says, okay? But once again, even if we're talking about salt and fresh water, there are picnic lines in salt and fresh water.
Well, okay, I don't think... Okay, one thing I'd like to put in. Obviously, we come from different perspectives. Obviously, we have a different view. But when you say that we're forcing meaning into it, I would go so far as to say that it's not anything that we're doing, but a fundamental structural problem in the way that the Quran is written. Because the Quran throughout uses relative pronouns to refer to things that aren't established sometimes in the entire surah or anywhere in the surrounding context. I mean, it seems like half the verses in the Quran start with they, and it doesn't define in the first half of the surah who they are. They will do this, and these things will do that, and they will say this. So it really leaves us hanging in a lot of instances where no matter what standpoint you're coming from, anyone reading the text and trying to extrapolate some significance from it, you must establish what they are. You must establish if it says he, she, they, you. You're forced to establish something, and if the Quran doesn't define it, there is room, for people to come to different conclusions, but it's not always done out of an agenda, one way or the other. You have to you're left struggling to understand who exactly or what exactly is it talking to. Yep. So please, I'm getting up, but I'm not gone. Everyone, play nice while I'm away.
All right. Well, yeah, I don't see any of this as being relevant to my argument. My argument, which has went unrefuted, is that a choice of words, regardless of what you think the author of the Quran was meaning by that, but a choice of words was used, which agrees with modern science. And so, and like I said, once again, let's look at those choice of words.
Can anyone else hear Nadir? Because he suddenly has stopped talking. Oh, there we go. Nadir, hold on. You're cut out. Can you start again? No. Your audio cut out. Can you restart that point? Sorry.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm sorry, yeah. My point is, I don't see anything of what you guys are saying as being relevant to my argument. It doesn't refute my argument. My argument is simply this, that a choice of words was used in the Quran, which agrees with modern science. The Quran says it is he who has let loose the two seas meeting together. Between them is a barrier, which none of them can transgress.
So what are the seas and what is the barrier?
Okay, hold on a second. And science says, let me just finish the point on what science says here. Science tells us that there are barriers in the seas. I'm like, wait a second, do you see the correlation here? A choice of words was used which agrees with science. That's not being refuted tonight.
Okay, I asked you a question when you came on and you still haven't answered it. What are the seas? What is the barrier?
Yeah, what are the seas? What are the barriers? First of all, these are all basically kind of red herrings. They're really not germane to my argument. Again, I'm not seeing a denial here. Oh, let me finish my point. I'm not seeing a denial here where you're saying, no. There is no agreement between the Quran and science here. A choice of words was not used, which agrees with science. We're not seeing a denial there. Now we're getting into, let's get into the more specifics and find out what kind of barrier it is. What is exactly a definition of one sea? I don't see any of that as being relevant to my argument.
So you're just saying, I think there are some words and I don't need to explain them. I don't need to give any definitions. I'm just going to say that they are the same and you have to prove that I'm wrong because the same word is being used. It doesn't work like that. Now, you are saying that in the Quran, there are words which are two seas and a barrier. but you don't want to tell us what the seas are and what the barrier is, and yet at the same time, you are saying you want to compare them to science, and you have no idea what science is. So how does that work?
Well, I think I've already explained and answered all of this, and like I said,
you haven't. What? Give us an example. Do you mean the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, and there is a barrier between them, which is the Straits of Gibraltar, or do you mean like you haven't? You just all you've done is given us a very vague claim, and then you keep on saying that we're twisting it and that we don't understand, that everything that we're saying is not germane. You have not yet actually given us proper examples and properly defined your argument.
Yeah, you'll have to, I guess, ask the same questions of scientists when I look up inside this book here called Earth, Portrait of a Planet. Second Stephen Marshak states, picnic line, the boundary between layers of water, different densities. What seas are you talking about? You see, what is really funny about this is if you look up the definition of picnic line, you will find many definitions going word for word what the Quran says. It doesn't define what kind of seas. So that's why I think this is all kind of funny. I'm sure what do you do when you read these scientific textbooks? Oh, no, I don't believe there's any barriers, because you didn't tell me what are those seas that you're talking about. So like I said, I don't see my argument being refuted here.
Okay, so
what are you doing now?
I think I see it refuted. Hold on. So the picnic lines and whatever, they're within the sea. These layers are within the ocean. This is not a separation of two seas. This is separations within a single sea with different layers. Ergo, the Quran is wrong. It is referring to different seas, whereas this is inter-sea separation of different layers due to density and pressure and so forth. So, wrong.
Yeah, I really don't know. I really don't understand your argument, so I can't really answer you.
Okay, let me try and make this. Let me try and make this simpler.
We are not making it. We are waiting for you to qualify your claim, because you are now starting to critique science books. We don't want to critique science books. We don't care if they're right or wrong or whatever. If there is a mistake in a science book, so be it. But you are making a claim, and you are saying that your sentence in the Quran is, when you compare it to science, which you just said is wrong, then it's correct. So a correct sentence in the Quran becomes correct because when you compare it to a wrong sentence in a science book, it becomes correct. This doesn't work. So you need to make a claim, you need to explain it, you need to explain your premise, you need to define it, and once we understand what your claim is, then, only then can we compare it to reality.
What you just see here, and I just told you, if you look at textbooks, they don't define it either. They just state picnic line, boundary of water, or barrier of water, layers of water. Now, when the Quran says...
I'm not talking about a science book. We're not talking about a science book. We're talking about the Quran.
Okay, what I'm showing you is that the Quran and science books are using virtually the exact same...
There is no science book. We are not talking about a science book. We're talking about only the Quran.
I've made my argument. I've shown you what science says, and I've shown you what the Quran says. And you
have not shown either. You are only critiquing, you are spewing. You're not even telling us what your argument is.
Okay,
and then you're telling us we are not refuting it. Tell us your argument.
Okay, like I said, I think I stated it over and over again, and we'll have to agree to disagree on this.
Yeah.
I stated it.
We've reached an impasse on this one.
No. Now, listen. So is this correct? You've been very vague, but is this correct? You are saying that somewhere on Earth, okay, in the ocean, there is one layer. Let's pretend that one layer is blue and the other layer is red, and there's no intermingle. Suddenly it goes from bam, blue to red. It's a layer, and the waters cannot mix within a sea. And this is what the Quran predicted. Now, forget about the colors. The colors is just to illustrate the image in your head. You can get rid of the colors, but you've got two different types of water, or the same type of water, but they cannot mingle at all. Is that what you are saying? Correct. Okay. Now, so, first of all, The Quran is saying within 2 seas. It is saying that 2 seas are separated, right? Now, what we have here is not 2 seas separated. We have within a single ocean different layers of water. So it is a single sea containing divisions within itself, based upon the scientific textbooks that you're mentioning. So the scientific textbooks are debunking the Quran as you have defined it. So your own definition that you have provided of the Quran, not ours, yours, contradicts the very scientific text that you are presenting.
Yeah, if I understand what you're saying, you are under the impression that the verse which I quoted is saying that the 2 seas do not mix, and that's false because they really do mix. Is that correct?
No, I'm saying that the okay. So let me go slow. Okay, let me go. So, all right. So a sea is like the Red Sea is a sea, or the Black Sea is a sea, right? It is a body of water. That is what a sea is. Now, the Quran says that there are 2 seas that are separated by a barrier, right? So,
right.
and therefore that they, however, what the thing that the phenomenon that you are referring to, the pycnocline, is not a barrier between 2 seas. The pycnocline is one of many. There are these different barriers within a single sea. It's not 2 seas. It is 1 sea that has divisions. It is a single, within the ocean, there are different layers of water density. So the Quran should say within 1 single, not 2 seas, it shouldn't say 2 seas, within 1 sea, there are different levels and barriers of water. It does not say that. It says 2 seas. It is saying there is a, like there's like a, like the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. They're 2 different bodies of water, even though they don't have a separation. But this is the kind of phenomenon the Quran is referring to as you've defined it. 2 seas. Sorry, the pycnocline and the other water barriers are not separations between 2 seas. They are inter-sea. Within the actual 1 single sea itself, they are barriers within it. So the Quran is wrong. Do you understand now?
Well, yeah, I understand now, and yeah, I mean, I would agree with you that when we spin our own interpretations and make up our own definitions, yes, absolutely. I think the Quran is wrong when people do that. I think any book of science is wrong when you do that. So if all of a sudden you seem to have this fixed definition of what a sea comprises of, and you know exactly what the Quran meant to say when it refers to sea.
So now it's your definition. Now it's your own interpretation.
Godless had a comment on a particular word that's used.
Well, can I finish my point with him?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, this all goes back to what I was saying, how from the very beginning, it's always my opponent who will spin his own interpretation.
Okay, well, Nadir, you're really repeating yourself, my friend. We take your point, but we can only eat up so many minutes in the show with. I mean, you've made that very clear before.
Okay.
We both, I think, could make this accusation of each other. Wherever there's wiggle room, we wiggle one way and you wiggle the other, and we'll just have to leave it at that. But this is like the 10th time you've said that, my friend. Anyway, Godless has a comment on the use of a particular vocabulary word.
Yeah, the Quran actually uses the word barzakh, which means barrier, but we have to, read the meaning of the word barzakh. It's not just a barrier. It's if we read it in Lisan al-Arab, which is the most famous Arabic dictionary, the tongue of Arab, it says barzakh is a narrow piece of land that is surrounded of water between 2 seas, and it's connected to the land, or something like an island. So that's the actual meaning of the word barzakh. It's a land barrier.
Yeah. What translation of the Quran are you reading out? Can I respond to that?
Yes,
that's,
please.
Lisan al-Arab, the tongue of Arab, is one of the oldest Arab dictionaries.
Yeah. Yeah, so basically we have, there's no I've got, I think, maybe 10 translations of the Quran. You can actually get them on the internet. There's no translation of the Quran which translates barzakh as land. So once again, changing the meaning of the words of the Quran to make it fit what you want.
Do you have
there's no translation.
English translations?
What?
Do you have English translations?
Yes, I do. Would you like me to present?
No, because Muslims are always telling me that the English cannot capture the truth and that you have to read it in Arabic. Here we have an Arabic speaker who is reading the Quran in Arabic and looking at one of the greatest Arabic dictionaries of all time. So the English translations are superfluous in this respect.
No, what if you compare them to
let
English
Nadir
science?
come back. Let Nadir come back and then stop.
Well, I speak Arabic in my house as well. I learned it over the last 3 years. Of course, I'm still a student, so I do understand the Arabic in this text. But what I'm pointing out to you is I can bring you 10 translations of the Quran, okay, and even from missionaries and people like that. No, you're now coming up with your own translation of the Quran, and so it's very interesting here that you do this. But like I said, I could go ahead and give you, actually they're all online, and when you look at them, nobody has translated it like the way you do, which goes back to what I'm saying, that people will try to reinterpret the Quran to read the science out of it.
See, the problem is that every single argument that you're making, I could make in the exact reverse to you, and I could use like you are interpreting the Quran for your own gain. You're bringing your own definitions and translations and your own interpretations. I mean, it's not relevant. I mean, unless you can actually substantiate it, it's not relevant to make these claims and assertions because we can equally make them in opposition. And so can we actually stick to the actual claim itself? You're claiming that and it's hard because you seem not to have given us a really clear definition, but you are claiming that the Quran says that there are two seas, two separate bodies of water two seas that do not mix. However, so that's the Quran. So you're giving us the Quran. That's your definition of the Quran. Then we have and I have to quickly check that. What is that word again? Here we go. The Pycnocline, right? Which is actually pick 1 second, because I'm fairly sure that it's actually one in a set of different. Here we go. We've got the pelagic, photic, epipelatic, all these complicated words referring to different layers. No, here we go. Pycnocline is Hypno. I can't pronounce these fancy Latin words. The point is, though, that you are saying that because there is different density. I mean, first of all, there are multiple layers. The Pycnocline is only one among many. Is the Quran referring to multiple layers, or is the Quran referring to only one barrier?
Well, yeah, I believe when it says barriers, it's in the plural.
Is it in the plural? Godless, in the actual original Arabic, is it plural or not?
No, it's a barzakh, which means singular, one.
Okay, so then Nadir, here's a great example. You have just given your own interpretation to the Quran, and your own baseless interpretation. You're saying that there's multiple layers, when in actual fact, it's only saying that there is a single barrier between two seas. So,
okay. I stand corrected on that. I'm sorry, I'm reading it right now. Barzakh is singular, right? Okay, I'm not giving my own interpretation. I'm trying my best to answer your questions. Okay. You're right. That's singular. I apologize.
It's fine. It's fine.
Okay, but then what that means is that because the Pycnocline is only one layer, there is the Pycnocline, the Isno-Pycna, the Chemocline. There are a whole many different layers. The Pycnocline is only one layer. Mm-hmm. So that means that the Quran is wrong by your own just accepted definition just then. Because there is not one boundary, there are many boundaries. If we're going to take boundary in that sense.
Right, I see. Yeah, and I guess what I would say is, once again, that's your own interpretation. When it says between them is a barrier which none of them can transgress, you read into it, between them is only one barrier which none of them can transgress. So
no, you just admitted that it's singular.
Let me finish my point. The logical fallacy which you've committed is called an argument from silence. The Quran doesn't really state.
Well, I'm sorry. It's an argument from enumeration and conjugation. You know, I mean, whenever.
So you are reading into the text what's not there.
But it is there. It is there. It is the verb created is conjugated for the singular. The word barzakh is singular. So we're not reading in what's not there. We're reading what's there.
You are reading. Let me finish my argument.
Okay.
When someone says, like for example, when someone says between them is a barrier which none of them transgress, you spawn your own interpretation, saying that means that the Quran is saying there is only one barrier, and that's pretty strange because when we see that when we read science again, look at the double standard. Let me go to the history. Let me go to the science textbook. On my website, it says the picnic line, and I'm quoting out of the Earth Portrait of a Planet. It says the picnic line, the boundary between, now wait a second, the boundary between layers of water, the boundary singular. Interesting. Maybe the science textbook is also an error. Let's go back to the other textbook I quoted. It says the seas where the picnic line is a distinct feature. It is a barrier which prevents deep waters from mixing. Okay, wait a second. Barriers that are singular. So I think once again we're just kind of whipping a dead horse. The issue, the main argument is not being refuted. A choice of words was used which agrees with science. And so I think we're just trying to, whip a dead horse. So I'm ready to go to the next verse of the Quran which agrees with science.
No, please, because Nadir, we are not refuting anything. Can't you understand that? We are not refuting anything. We are waiting for you to make a claim that can be compared to oceanography. You are not doing that. You are telling us what we are thinking. You are telling us what we are doing. You are telling us all the things that we are doing wrong, but you have not told us yet what it is that you are claiming. Do you understand this?
Right, and I think I've answered all your questions, and we are just going to have to.
No, you have not answered.
Okay, well, I think it is.
I have asked you 2 questions.
I think it's fair to say. I think it's fair to say one way or the other we've reached an impasse on the subject.
No, because I have more information now.
Okay,
Here
well,
I am
actually,
the Turbulent Ocean, the Turbulent Ocean by S.A. Thorpe, talking about the is no Picknell and this is not the same as your one, right? Your one is the pick no climb. This is the is no Picknell shape when steady along slope current induces upwelling in the boundary Ekman layer. It's talking about boundaries and how the is no Picknell is it. So in what you don't understand is that the Picknell is not the only barrier. There are many barriers. Now you agreed that the barrier in the Quran is singular, and yet all right, this is correct. You said that there are boundary between the two seas, right? There's a single. However, the science, right? You see, your quotes are only concerning the Picknell. There are other barriers as well that you did not mention in your quote, and these barriers are multiple, plural. So by definition, you just said that there is a single barrier, and yet the science says that there are many barriers. So by your interpretation, the Quran is wrong because there are multiple barriers.
But I've already answered all of this, and I think in discussions we just got to come to a point where we have to agree to disagree, and let the jury decide, whoever's listening to this tape. And I think we've reached that point. And I'll just answer you one last time. When the Quran says between them is a barrier which none of them can transgress, trying to impose upon the text the number of barriers is your own interpretation, okay? Because the text doesn't actually say that there's only one barrier and there's none others which exist. That's what you're imposing upon the text. As far as the actual numbers of barriers, it is more. We cannot confirm or deny that from the text because it simply doesn't say that. Like I said, I'm just making an observation on where the Quran agrees with science. I'm ready to go on to the next point.
Yeah,
I
think.
Why go to the next point?
Well, because we've been on this for a long time. That's why I stopped.
Come on.
I mean,
listen. I think Nadir Ahmed, you're bringing your own interpretation to the Quran by saying that this refers to the pycnocline. Where in the Quran does it say pycnocline? Oh, it doesn't.
Well,
so you're just referring to the. You're just making an assumption there. Right? Because it actually doesn't refer to the pycnocline. It doesn't refer to pressures. So you're just making an assumption.
Yeah,
right. There is actually no direct connection.
Nadir, let it go for now. I think both sides have made. I don't think I'm unfairly cutting anyone off if I move things on. We actually have someone who was really anxious to call in while you were on. So I can't now. I don't have control over the callers. He might want to talk to you about the pycnocline. If so, I'm sorry. So Frank, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, Nadir, I've heard you speaking on a debate with DPR Jones and Godless just yesterday, and you accuse atheists of creating new definition. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so
the debate was with Captain Disguise. It was Godless Saudi and Captain Disguise.
Yeah, sorry, Capital Disguise. Yeah, so you accuse atheists of creating new definitions of words, where in that debate particularly you have used a definition of the word yabghiyan that it's never heard of before. Like and you used the adjective baghi with the stressing on the ya to say that the two waters do not transgress morally on each other or sexually, and that the word baghi means prostitution. That if that's not creating new definitions for Quranic terms, I don't know what creating new definitions means. And also this game has been being played by all of you Muslim apologists, or most actually, just apologists who claim that there is scientific knowledge in the Quran. One example would be for Hamza Andreas Tortes, who actually created two contradictory false definitions of the Arabic preposition thumma in just half an hour. He first says it means directly after, which is wrong, and then he says it means simultaneously, which is also wrong. And I can go on and on about those examples on such creating either new definitions, taking things out of context, adding stuff up, or taking stuff out. There are numerous examples of such. I don't know what to call it, but it's deceptive, and the method that you use is it's especially in the Muslim world, it's like parasites feeding on the ignorance of most people and then keeping them bound to those shackles that Islam is. And it's probably, I might add this point, which is a side note, it's probably a result of the deep inferiority complex that unfortunately we in the Muslim world suffer from, which actually results exactly from the behavior of Islamists, of this Muslim thought, and it's the reason why our contribution to modern science, to modern universal knowledge is very near to zero. So please respond to that, Mr. Ahmed.
Yeah, well, first of all, what I noticed here, I think people here have heard that debate which I had with Captain Disguise here. I don't even think they're going to agree with you. So let me see if I understand what you're saying is correctly. You're saying baghi does not refer to sexual immorality like prostitution, adultery, and fornication?
No, it doesn't. Baghi, with the stressing the ya, with stressing the last letter of the word, means a prostitute. It's an adjective. The root of the word is bagha. Bagha means that it has different meanings. If you add ala after it, preposition ala, bagha ala, baghaytu alayka, or baghayta alayya, it means I have transgressed on you. That's true. However, the word and transgression in this it means aggression. It means I have so if one tribe تبغي على الأخرى means either raid it or do injustice into it. So and then you have the word يبغي. It's another sense of the word which means want. So and we still use it in the Arabian Peninsula. يبغي أبغي means I want something. We actually use it in the dialect as well.
Right. بغي, yeah.
It's used in the Quran. أفغير الله يبغون.
Okay.
Exactly.
Godless. Since Nadir's pretty heavily outnumbered here, I'm going to let sort of Frank and Nadir go one-on-one for the duration of Frank's stay on the call. Okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Do I get to respond to that?
Yes, please.
Baghi, actually, whenever it's used, it's used to describe some kind of moral issue. And if you listen to the tape, I said I accept that. They do not transgress. Transgress here is what actually. Listen, 1 second here.
That's fine. If there's something you need to take care of, you don't need.
Yes, I got a kid over here.
Yeah. Okay.
I actually accepted that. That is exactly what they mean. They do not transgress. But the important point here, and this was a mistake which I think the other guys were doing, they were interpreting, giving the word baghi or bagha a meaning which is not in the dictionary, and that is to mixing. Khalata. That's a different word. Khalata means mixing. I'm like, wait a second. That's not what the word means. So actually, you need to take this objection of yours, and you need to point it to the people on the show who are falsely interpreting the word bagha to mean to mixing together. And that's not in the dictionary. Bagha is not what it means. In fact, let me finish my point here. Let me read to you exactly what...
Nobody on the show is doing this.
Come on. Let him come back.
Come on, that was a false accusation. Nobody
on
the show is doing that. It's false. He's going to go back later and say the people on the show said this. Nobody on the show said this.
There's the recording. It will speak for itself. Let him finish.
If I'm mistaken, well, I apologize. But people were interpreting bagha to mean mixing. Let me show you what bagha means. There's actually several different dictionaries. It means punk, slut, wench, harlot, streetwalker, professional, trollop, which are all basically sexually. I'm basically reading out of the dictionary. All sexually charged words. But
may I just respond quickly to that?
Wait, hold on. Let me finish my point.
Because you're wrong here. There's something that you need to understand. Sorry. Okay. Okay. It's very quick. Just 15 seconds. The dictionaries, when you type in the letters, it doesn't take into account the different pronunciations that are the dhamma, fatha, shadda. So it would give you different meanings than the word than the root of the word, which is bagha yabghi. So please go ahead again.
Yeah, the mistake which and I can't finger point who it was, but Captain Disguise for sure, and I corrected him on that. The mistake which they were making is that they were thinking that the word bagha means mixing, khalata, and that's not true. That's not what it means, and so I had to correct him on that. So when the Quran says they do not transgress, what it means here, it's not talking about they do not mix, because the word mixing is not used over here. It's bagha, which means something completely different. But I'm ready to move on to the next point where I can show you where the Quran agrees with science.
Hold on. Captain Disguise, I have Captain Disguise on Skype. He wants to come in. Can I bring him in?
No.
No, it's going to complicate.
He stole enough of the wind out of our sails. Fuck him. I'm sorry. I apologize, Nadir. Your daughter's in the room. I'll clean up my language.
She's 1 year old.
Okay. I'm sorry. So yeah, let's go ahead. I'm going to keep Frank on, and go ahead and let's move on to something else. For goodness sake, we've been on this a long time.
Without the first thing having been resolved, we move to the second. Okay.
It's as resolved as it's going to get.
Okay, this is true.
Although I'll just say, Captain Disguise messaged me and says that he did not say that bagha means mix, but okay.
Well, since we touched on some of the same material, Captain and Godless touched on some of the same subject matter, we'll put a link to Nadir and Captain's discussion in the link to these videos. Okay.
Shall we move on to the next verse?
Please.
All right. I believe that's inside chapter 24, verse 40 of the Quran. And over there, once again, is talking about oceanography over here. Let me bring it up for you. It says, or is a light of the darkness in the vast deep seas, overwhelmed with great waves, topped by a great wave, topped by dark clouds, darkness one above the other. So the first point I want to bring up here is that they're saying that there's waves inside the vast deep seas, okay? If a man stretches out his hand, he can hardly see it. And he for whom Allah has not appointed light, for him there is no light. Okay? Lahu min nur. There is no light for him. Now, what's interesting here is that once again we see in one verse of the Quran, we have two statements which agree with science. Number one, it states that there are waves inside the deep seas. And this is exactly what science tells us today. These are called internal waves in the vast deep seas. There are waves there. The second correct statement there is that there, at the very bottom of the sea, there is no light. That is actually, again, a second scientifically correct statement. All right, go ahead.
Who wants to come back first?
Sorry, which verse was this again?
That was
chapter verse.
Okay.
Chapter 24, verse 40.
Yeah, right off the bat, okay, so you're saying that there's no light whatsoever at the very bottom of the ocean, and that's what the Quran says?
Excuse me, Nadir. Where does it
I'm
say?
sorry, Frank.
Sorry,
there's one thing I'd like to address first. You're saying that the Quran definitively states that at the bottom of the ocean there's no light.
Well, absolutely. It says in the deep sea, not at the bottom. It says in the deep, vast, deep seas. There it says one of the attributes given to it is that there is no light, and that's what science has only recently discovered, like within the last 100 years.
So, but the Quran doesn't count organisms that give off their own light.
No, actually at the bottom of the vast deep seas, if you go deep enough, there is no light.
People knew this 5,000 years ago.
Except for the creatures that give off their own light. I mean,
I'm not aware of that.
I count it.
Do you have a reference showing that? Because from what I've seen, I've not seen any, like where the Titanic is. We'll just give that as an example. I'm not aware of any animals which give off light that deep in the sea.
You know, that's funny. That's funny. I met a guy from Texas once, and I could not convince him that there was such a thing as an electric eel. It was so aggravating. I went round and round and round with this guy, and he just said, there ain't no animal what can make electricity. It was infuriating. But anyway, I can assure you there are creatures in the very depths of the ocean that they give off light.
Anglerfish.
Can I say something here?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Now here's kind of the rules which I follow when I debate, and everything on my website is well documented. Okay, so if you are going to make an affirmation, a scientific affirmation, I would ask at least for you to show me a reference where you're quoting out of, and I would like to have it because all my references are there.
Okay.
All references are one click away.
Can we do it the other way around? Can we do it the other way around? Nadir, you are saying
I've got one.
that science has only recently, science meaning oceanography, I suppose, has only recently discovered that the bottom of the ocean is dark. Where is this?
Oh, I'm sorry, what's your question?
Oh.
Where did I get it that they've only recently discovered it?
You said that science, whatever science is in your brain, science has only recently discovered that it is dark at the bottom of the sea. Where do you get this from?
Well, actually, I have a reference on my website pointing to a
Okay, we're not on your website. Can you just give it to us?
Let me just read what it says here, okay? Scientists, this is what it says over here on the CNN article. 600 feet below.
CNN is a scientific source. Since when?
Okay, come on, let him come back.
No, I asked for a scientific source and not CNN.
This is a scientific source. if you will allow me to
be
read
nice, everyone. Be nice.
Listen, you guys, in order for us to do this, you cannot just continuously cut me off. Let me just finish my point here, okay? Because this is talking about NASA discovers, okay, life 600 feet below the Antarctic ice, okay? And it says over
NASA
here.
is the
Let him come back. Let him come back. No, stop. Let him come back. Let him.
We can't do it like that.
Yeah. I let him come back. Let him read what he has to read. Yes. Let him read it in its entirety. I'll kick you out of the call. Stop. I'll kick you out of the call.
All right, let me finish my point. Okay, you guys, is everything cool down? Okay.
For I am the most forgiving, most merciful.
Okay, let me tell you, I'm acting. I'm very calm. I'm very cool. I'm acting because I get so pissed off with people feeding me nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, shall I read? Continue reading? Here's my reference. It says 600 feet below the Antarctic ice where no light can be found. NASA scientists made a startling discovery. Now, it is a CNN article. Right. Now, to me, I think that's authoritative. When CNN quotes NASA, I believe that's authoritative. Now, if that's not authoritative for you, it's not a problem. I can bring another reference for you.
Please do, because it's not authoritative.
Okay. I'll bring something else for you then. I'll jot that down, in fact. I'll make a note. But regardless, is this a fact which other people can agree upon? Do you believe that there is no light? If you go deep far enough, there is no light. Is this something you guys agree with, or?
That's not the point. The point is you claim that science only has recently come to know that it is dark at the bottom. I want to know where you get this.
Okay, as far as recently, you're right. I don't have a reference for that. The only reference I did find was that there is no light can be found at the bottom of the sea. As far as when it was discovered, you are correct. Unfortunately, I don't have that reference, okay?
So in other words, we need to catch you out with everything until you admit it. Why don't you do your own work in the beginning instead of bullshitting?
All right.
Why don't you give us facts?
Listen,
I'm back. It's been very civil up to this point, okay? Now we've been at it a while. I guess tempers are getting a little frayed.
But we're getting the same thing again. It's just bullshit. We are going to go through this again and again. Why don't we stick to one point and do it properly?
Okay, I'd like to answer Ahmed's question. In answer to what you were asking, I would say that no light in the sky seems to be penetrating all the way to the bottom of the sea. But at the bottom of the sea, you have other sources of light, like creatures that glow through chemical reactions, and you also have faults where lava seeps up, and of course the lava creates light. So there are other things producing local sources of light. The only way I think you could get it to work is if you could demonstrate that the Quran meant only light from the sun and moon.
Yeah, well, to answer your question, like I said, maybe you'll have to bring a reference for this as well. I'm not aware of
Morris Burton.
Come on, Kling.
Here's a reference. The International Wildlife Encyclopedia, Volume 10, 3rd edition, published in Tarrytown, New York, Marshall Cavendish Corporation, 2002, page 653, which discusses the deep-sea anglerfish, has a big coloured photograph of the black, dark sea with the luminant light on the end of the dangly thing. Female deep-sea anglerfish attract their prey by means of the luminous rod that projects from the head. There you go. Quran is...
actually, you kind of interrupted me there. I was trying to finish my point here. That actually proves nothing, okay? Because what the reference which you need to produce is that at the very deepest part of our seas, there are actually glowing animals, okay? That you did not produce a reference for.
Oh, I'm sorry. Nadir, I put a link. I put a link in the chat for you. So okay. I guess if you weren't looking at the Skype chat, you might not have noticed it. But I put a link in there.
Okay. Well, yeah. Let me take. Actually, I don't know where the Skype chat is.
Let me.
Yeah.
You see where I'm typing all the random characters in the window?
No, I don't see that.
Okay. I'll send it to you over on the contact list.
Hold on a second. Let me see if I could. I'm sure it's here somewhere. Okay, Blog TV. That's the one
you're in the Blog TV chat. I'll just paste it in there. I was putting in Skype. There you go.
Or actually, this is Captain Disguise. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing here.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, well, why don't you read to me what exactly is, because I don't have your reference here. Can you please read to me what exactly does it say?
Okay, yeah. This is from ucsb.edu. Bioluminescence is simply light produced by a chemical reaction which originates in an organism. It can be expected any time and in any region or depth in the sea. Its most common occurrence to the sailor is in the often brilliantly luminescent bow wave or wake of the surface ship. In these instances, the causal organisms are almost always dinoflagellates, single-cell algae, or, often numbering many hundreds per liter. So there's everything from, larger fish. There's all sorts of more bizarre-shaped organisms that have bioluminescent properties, and also there's, microorganisms at the surface. But there's a wide variety of different creatures that produce their own light. And of course, again, there's also faults at the bottom of the sea and on shelves that spew up magma, and that, of course, creates light. As a matter of fact, there are life forms sometimes that grow up around these plumes of heat.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, I can't comment on it because I've not seen that link. You'll have to send it to me.
I just have a question for Nadir.
Let him come back first. Nadir, go ahead and come back, and then we'll come back to Frank.
Yeah. Yeah, basically, I think in order for you to prove your case, you got to prove that at all, at the very deepest levels of our seas, okay, in any place, basically, and everywhere inside the ocean, that we have glowing animals that actually give off life. Now, I haven't seen that, but like I said, I'll be very interested in seeing that from you. So we'll put that on the back burner right now. The whole issue about internal waves, that there are waves inside the sea. Did you guys have any comments on that?
Well, okay.
Challenge
I have a question.
Frank had something. Frank had something.
Yes. Nadir, could you tell me, please, where does it say that... Can you hear me now? Where does it say that the waves are in the deep sea? Where in the verse? I have the verse on the screen here, just in front of me. Could you please let me know, tell me where it says that?
Okay, well, now do you also have an English translation?
Yes, it also has English translation.
Which English translation are you reading from?
It says Sahih International. I care about the Arabic more than
the translation. Now,
there are discrepancies among the translations.
So
there's only one Arabic, which is a fact you're very proud of, by the way.
Well, now before I show you that, okay, my question is, do you have a translation of the Quran that agrees with your interpretation? Let me first ask that.
I don't read the Quran in English. Actually, I've never done so. I read it in Arabic. So if I brought you a book from the 16th century, like a Shakespeare, saying waves upon waves, what would come to mind to you? What is he describing here?
Waves upon waves?
Yeah, موج فوقه موج.
That's exactly what it says inside the Quran. I'm actually reading the Arabic, and I think it's an accurate translation. It says "fi" in Bahar, the sea. Notice it didn't say "ala," "fawqa." It says in the seas. Lujian, I believe over there is talking about a fathomless depth, or something like that. It says yakhshahu, as what you were saying, mawjan min fawqaha, fawqihi mawjan, waves on top of waves. So the translation is actually
simply means something that covers another thing. So waves upon waves cover.
Now that's the only interpretation. I'm reading the Arabic. Fawqa means on top.
Nadir, please, I want us to be on the same page. You're saying that the claims your claims of science in the Quran cannot be disputable with any reasoning, with any with any cannot be explained naturally. In other words, cannot be explained by being something that is known by the people of the time, or as you know what I mean. So if you would look at it, if you would look at the verse with the mind of a person coming from the 7th, 6th century, what would you think it means? Waves upon waves upon each other, like they're one of them takes the other one out. غاشية تغشى. Is it just the sea, the waves that we see with our eyes, or is it? Why would you invoke the deep seas? I see no reason. There is no invocation. Who is reinterpreting the Quran? Could you please tell me?
Well, I think the translations, actually I have something like 10 translations in front of me. I think it's pretty accurate. What it says that in the fathomless deep seas, there are waves above which is a wave. So I think the translation is pretty correct. They're talking about in the seas, in the deep seas, there are waves.
Okay.
Well, okay. If that's so, then I here have a first of all, before I get onto that, in McGraw-Hill Concise Encyclopedia of Environmental Science on page 178, it says that deep sea trench shown that flashes from luminescent organisms could be detected down to the depths of 12,300 feet. In deep sea trenches. There you go. In the deep sea trenches, we have luminescent organisms. So
we're talking about internal waves. We're talking about internal waves.
He's got you there, Kling. We moved on. That ship has sailed. That ship has sailed, Kling, leaving in its wake many microorganisms glowing happily. It's old news.
I just wanted to
explain
cover
where
that.
the deep comes in.
Wait, because I now here have a quote from Pliny. Is it Pliny the Elder, the noted Roman naturalist, senator, and commander of the imperial fleet in the 1st century AD, observed this peculiar behavior of fishermen's nets in the Strait of Bosphorus near Istanbul. Pliny deduced that surface and bottom currents were flowing in opposite directions, and he provided the first written documentation of what we now call estuarine circulation.
Okay, you want me to respond to all that now?
If you like, I mean.
Okay, so yeah, I believe the word for current is tayar, right? Whoever the Arabic person is. But see, now this is, let me first respond to this whole thing about glowing. I think you guys are going to get back to me, and you guys are going to produce a reference for me that even at the very bottom of the most deepest ocean, you have glowing organisms. That I cannot confirm or deny because I've never seen that. So you will get back with me on that, and that's in everywhere, all over our seas. So I will wait for that reference from you. So now let's go back to internal waves. Yeah, basically the word current is not used in the Quran inside this ayat. The word wave is, and there's a difference between the two. So once again here, we see another agreement where the Quran uses choice of words, which agrees with modern science. So unless you're ready, let's move on to the next one.
Nadir,
no, because
you did not answer where the deep comes in, because you were asked where in the Quran does it say deep seas, deep waves. You have not answered that.
Sea, the word, when we look at the Arabic, it says sea bahar. So we're talking about in the seas, and now the word lujian is used. Lujian, what it means is something fathomless, something that I think that's the best definition. Okay, and again, this is going back to the English
translation. So you are now changing the Quran.
Let him finish. Make sure he's finished.
Yes, that's what they do. Change the Quran. Tahrif.
May I finish?
Yes.
Change the Quran.
Stop. This is your final warning, buddy. I know you're frustrated. I know you're jumping the bit. This is your final warning. You have to let him come back.
I thought he was finished.
Okay, well, let me finish my point here. That's why, we go to the several different translations of the Quran, so that we see how the other translators are also translating the Quran. So it's not me coming up with my own translation I'm quoting from other exegetes and other people who are translating it, and so that's why they talked about the word lujian is used there, which connotates something very fathomless and depth.
Okay. No, luji just means storming or hitting each other. It's talking about the waves. It does not mean in the deep sea. The word luji, it's referring to the waves.
Well, what does a luji mean? It's talking about something fathomless, right?
No, it's when waves like hit each other and like this. It's a stormy day. They call it the wave are being luji. That's what it means.
Yes.
Well, I don't think that's the case. As I said, we have several different translations, and they're all talking. Shakir translated deep sea, hilal, Sakhidin Hilali, deep seas, Yusuf Ali, or it is like the depths in the darkness of the vast deep seas. So I have several translations of the Quran which will show you that it is accurate. It's talking about the deep seas. Okay. And I can give you that link if you like.
Do we feel we've explored the internal waves long enough? Would we like to go on to a third one?
Excuse me, guys. Do you mind if I bring up the black holes one again, just since Nadir wasn't with us at that time?
If it's something that Nadir, if it's one of his arguments, you can bring it up with him. Otherwise,
I'm not sure if it is. Do you know the ayah, the verse Al-Jawari al-Khunnas? Al-Jawari al-Khunnas, the one that refers to black holes being mentioned in the Quran.
That's not my argument. Yeah. I don't argue that.
Yeah, we can't ask him to defend somewhat.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I thought he accepts all the scientific, or most of them at least. So, but anyways, just to let you know that this one is in the International Commission for I'jaz Ilmi in the Quran and Sunnah. So that's it. Please go.
Okay. Yes. Let me go ahead and move on to the next one. So, as I said, my argument is actually correct. And all I'm saying here is that a choice of words is being used which agrees with science. So let's go now to another verse of the Quran. This is chapter 2, verse 233. Okay, chapter 2, verse 233, where it says over there, a mother shall give suck to their children for 2 whole years. And now, again, you could probably say, well, this is a coincidence, or maybe it was a lucky guess or something like that. Now, Science Today tells us, UNICEF, infant and young child feeding guide states that it is well recognized that a period from birth to 2 years of age is a critical window for the promotion of good growth, health, and behavior development. Therefore, optimal infant and young child feeding is crucial during this period. And so what they're saying as it goes on here that you should basically breastfeed your child for 2 years. One last reference. The World Health Organization recommends continued breastfeeding for up to 2 years of age, or you could go beyond. So once again, all I'm saying here is a choice of words was used, which agrees with science.
So the Quran. I'm sorry, I missed something. Was this from the Quran or Hadith? I apologize. I should have been paying closer attention.
It's in the Quran.
Okay, so breastfeed for 2 full years.
Right.
Okay, great. Now, regardless of, do you know if it's a common practice to breastfeed for a full 2 years in some parts of the Muslim world?
No, I've never seen any evidence of that.
Oh.
You're talking about pre-Islamic, right?
No. I'm talking about, like, is it the custom today? Are there a lot of people who follow that verse literally to the letter?
Well, I know some people who do try to follow that. In fact, when my wife was pregnant, we have a kid over here, we wanted to go 2 years, but unfortunately, the well dried up, and so we weren't able to. Oh. But yeah, I could use myself as an example.
Yeah. So who wants to come back on this?
2 years or more. So
wait, it says 2 years or more?
In the World Health Organization, it says 2 years or more. So I don't see anything miraculous here. It's like, I don't see the magic.
Another point. Just another point.
If Nadir, let Nadir come back.
Okay.
And then Frank.
Yeah, once again, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm on the show, is to help you understand our arguments, which I think you guys are misunderstanding. Nobody's here showing you something which is miraculous by simply showing where the Quran agrees with science, because it could be many different explanations for it. What I'm showing you is that on this issue here, the Quran does agree with science, because they say that 2 years is what the scholars, or I'm sorry, the scientists recommend for breastfeeding your child. And they call it this critical window of development. That'd be 2 years. Now, of course, you could breastfeed even longer. It's not going to hurt. But once again, the Quran agrees on this point. 2 years.
Okay, now Frank had something to say?
Yeah, Nadir, do you think teething has a role in, or is a factor in this miracle at all?
Teething, what do you mean by that? Can you just explain?
I mean, usually by 2 years of age, children grow teeth, and usually, I mean, my grandmother, she was an illiterate person, as the vast majority of women at that time, thanks to Islam, and she tells me at that time, I mean, my mom also tells me that all women at that time would stop after 2 years. Why? Not because of the teething. That's what they usually say. Children grow teeth, and it doesn't. It's better to train them to eat. That's like what Arabs do for thousands of years. Isn't this a simpler, more naturalistic explanation than the inflated meanings that you want to give the verse?
Well, I'm actually not giving any inflated meaning. All I'm showing is, once again, the Quran is agreeing with science, and I'm not interpreting anything here. But as for teething, I don't know how that's relevant to my argument, so I'll have to remain silent on that.
Well, your argument is that no naturalistic explanation can be provided for any of the scientific claims that might coincide. I wouldn't say that.
No, that's not my argument.
In general and vague.
Let me correct you.
Yeah.
Let me correct your misunderstanding. My argument is that if you look at the totality of the statements which agree with modern science, as we have seen a few at least, there is no natural explanation for the totality. However, individual ones, yeah, maybe you could explain it away as a coincidence. Maybe you could explain it away as a lucky guess. So, no, I would say it's hypothetically possible to give a natural explanation to the verse which I quoted you.
And this is, sorry, you go, Frank, but I want to...
Okay, thanks. How about the many verses that contradict science? You say everything in the Quran is scientifically accurate. How about the many verses that contradict science, like so many verses that say that the earth is flat, including that which says dahaha, which in no sense of the world, in all Arabic dictionaries, probably before 1989, all agree that the word dahaha means made it flat, and when it comes to an ostrich, which doesn't look like an ostrich egg, it always means the place where the ostrich lays its eggs, where she flattens the place where it lays its eggs, and then lays them. So, I mean, who's changing, who's reinterpreting, who's changing or inflating or taking out of context? Is it us or you, Nadir Ahmed? Please admit it.
Yes. Once again, like I said, I think it's you in particular, because there's no verse in the Quran which teaches that the earth is flat. Once again, we see where people are trying to. Well, let me finish my point. We see how people are trying to spin science into the Quran, change the meaning, so that it could suit their own purpose. But here's, again, these are two different topics. I would love to talk to you about the false allegations about scientific errors in the Quran, but I can only juggle one topic at a time. Either we talk about the scientifically accurate statements, or we talk about the alleged scientific errors. But I can't juggle both at the same time here. So I'm ready to move on to the next scientifically correct statement.
Okay, so
you
I think
100% correct. Let's stay on breastfeeding. You say that breastfeeding in the Quran says 2 or more years. Is this correct?
Let me get the exact verse here. Just so to make sure I quote it exactly. It says, a mother shall give suck to their children for 2 years, for 2 whole years, who desire to complete summer suckling. Yeah, 2 years, basically.
So
right.
Well, basically or not?
2 years. 2 years. I'm sorry. Yes, 2 years.
Okay, and you are saying this is in agreement with science?
Absolutely.
Which science?
Well, I quoted for you the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, which stated that...
The Center of Disease Control and Prevention, is that a scientific institution?
It is, and I also quoted for you UNICEF.
How come, okay, let's do, you said you only juggle one at a time. Let's stay with that. You are saying, and this is your definition, that the Center for Disease Control and Prevention is a scientific institution. Now, if it is a scientific institution, what does it say? It says the World Health Organization recommends continued breastfeeding up to 2 years of age. Now, how does that fit in with what you are claiming?
Right. So what they're actually, they're actually recommending up to 2 years of age. This is exactly what the Quran said, 2 years. And not only that, but UNICEF.
I asked you what it says. I asked you specifically what it said, and this is not what you told me just now.
Okay, hold on, let me finish my point. And then UNICEF fills in the blank why the 2 years is so important. UNICEF
I'm not
tells...
talking about UNICEF. We're not juggling two things. We're
Stop,
juggling one thing. We are juggling only the Center for Disease Control.
Let him come back in full every time, okay?
We have to understand the science behind it. Again, it says on the UNICEF website, it says it is well recognized that the period from birth to 2 years of age is a critical window for the promotion of good growth, health, and behavior development. And that is where they said that you should breastfeed, continue to breastfeed for 2 years or more, because this is the critical window for child development. And that's exactly, and the Quran says, breastfeed the child for 2 years.
Okay, it says in the Quran, you should breastfeed your child for 2 years. It does not say up to 2 years or more, it says 2 years. Now, I cannot juggle two things at the same time, so I'm looking only at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, which you say is a scientific institution. And they are saying the World Health Organization recommends. So which is now the scientific institution that recommends what? That the science is in agreement with the Quran?
The World Health Organization and UNICEF.
I'm not talking about UNICEF. UNICEF is not mentioned on the Center for Disease Control and Prevention that you quote on your webpage as a source. You are quoting the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, in turn, says the World Health Organization recommends this. So you are taking a source that you don't understand, which quotes another place which you don't source, which is the actual source of the source, which says something different than the Quran. Please explain.
Okay, actually, before you come back, Nadir, I have to interject. This particular thing about the breastfeeding, I don't think it holds really a lot of potential for either side of the argument, if you guys don't mind my saying. It really doesn't seem like, you know, even before we get started in the minutiae of where this, it just doesn't seem like it goes anywhere. You know, I beg your pardon, Nadir, but I think women knew how to breastfeed for a long time, and maybe they do it less or more than 2 years. There's no way that this argument could impress me, no matter how much you dotted your I's and crossed your T's. It's kind of unimpressive out of the gate. So I'm going to have to pull the plug on this. Please come back, but then I'd like to move on to a fourth.
I want to go on to the next one, because I think the argument, though, again, whether, as I stated from the very beginning, you know, the goal really is not to impress you, because if you look at the individual statements which agree with science, in my opinion, none of them is impressive. But when you take the totality of them, what keeps happening over and over and over again, that's impressive to me. But there is an agreement between science and what the Quran says. Science says up to 2 years or more. Of course, it's not going to hurt you. The Quran says that 2 years is, you should breastfeed your child for 2 years. UNICEF says, let me finish my point. 2 years is a critical window for child development. So yes, once again, we see the Quran does agree with science, at least on this point. So I'm ready to go on to the next point here, because I don't see where you're saying, no, it disagrees.
I just want to. So first of all, just with the whole teeth. I mean, with the whole breastfeeding thing. I mean, the easy and simple explanation is, as Charles Edward, Anne-Marie Winslow, and Walter Camp in Healthy Living Book 1, How Children Can Grow Strong for Their Country's Service, published by Charles E. Merrill Company in 1920, page 100. Soon they begin to grow and push out through the gums. By the time a baby is 2 years old, it usually has all its first set of teeth. So that the most logical and reasonable explanation, without the presuppositions of the Quran being from God and therefore the Quran being perfect, is that it's simply age 2. By the time they're age 2, they've got all their teeth now, so now they can start eating. They don't need a breastfeed. No, that's it. That's the easy, simple explanation. But you're saying that when you look at all the miracles, because there's so many one after another, it's miraculous. No. The reason why there are so many miracles is because people like you, or maybe not you, maybe you're just picking up the scraps after the original trailblazers, but Muslim apologists, they look through the Quran and they search and search and search until they find little references, little snippets that they take out of context. They ignore what the original context and what the actual meaning of the Arabic is, as demonstrated in the most prestigious and authoritative Arabic dictionaries like Lisan al-Arab. That you ignore that and you take these little snippets and go and you find the most vestigial correlations between something mentioned by some scientist or in some book at some point, and you make a connection and you say, there. See, that is why, because there is a deliberate effort by Muslim apologists who presuppose that the Quran is true, to establish that the Quran is true using science and taking these things out of context. So it's not a miracle. Doesn't impress me. I don't see why this should be impressive to anyone.
I think we've reached an impasse on this one. Let's rather than go on to a fourth, I think the show will end maybe fairly soon. I'm going to call it, since we've addressed 3 individual arguments. I think we should spend the rest of the time addressing the meta argument of what it supposedly demonstrates. So I'm going to kick it off, Nadir, with this question: is okay. So far, Nadir, we've examined 3 of the claims from your site. Your scoreboard shows 3 out of 3, with the Quran, perfect, 3 home runs. For us, the Quran has struck out from our perspective, based on what we read and based on what we observe. So, despite those disagreements, let's say that we could go back in time, do the show again, and you get us to agree that all 3 points are in fact accurate. What do you feel it demonstrates? Do you think that this is evidence of an otherworldly nature of the Quran or a divine nature or something like that? I'm not trying to front load your answer. I'm just saying, what do you think that is truly demonstrated at the end of the day?
Well, yeah. Let me just kind of start off by saying, whether if the individual is convinced or not, I have no control over that. I mean, I found it very hard to convince a Hindu that his monkey god is not real. Now, they're going to tenaciously cling to the fact that their monkey god is real, no matter how much rationale I give them. And the same thing with the atheists. They're going to tenaciously cling to their monkey god. They're going to tenaciously cling to their atheist doctrine. But I think to answer your question is that in the end, what it proves is that the author of the Quran, it could not have been a man. There is a supernatural force over there. I've only been able, due to the time constraints, and actually the guys had more time to talk than I did, I was only able to demonstrate 3 occurrences where the Quran agrees with science. There's a lot more. And I hope maybe in the future I can go ahead and share that with you. But to answer your question again, it proves that there is a supernatural force behind the authorship of the Quran.
Okay, well, when you say that there's it's evidence of the supernatural authorship, I personally wouldn't go so far as to say that it had to be supernatural just to be accurate. For example, I have, if someone makes accurate predictions, let's say that there's someone who bets on baseball games and gets them all right. It could be that he really knows the game. It could be that he rigged it somehow or had inside information. It could be that he's just extremely lucky. I think that what Muslims who make this argument, and also people of other religions who make arguments of a scientific nature or other nature, trying to demonstrate the supernatural bona fides of their scripture, I think they underestimate just how much we would have to see before we would definitively say, okay, that does it. This book was clearly, has a supernatural author, because just for it to be correct isn't quite enough. If there's any way that information could have been accurately surmised without the supernatural. I mean, from our perspective, the supernatural always seems the least likely.
Well, okay, well, to answer your question, we have to first explore the natural explanation. Is it luck? Maybe these things are all coincidence. But we can rule all that out. And I think that's, and like I said, if I'm really not here to force, my views on you. Of course, people can make up their own minds on whether they want to honestly examine the evidence, or they can hold on to their monkey god and just believe that is true. Okay, so that part I have no control over. You mentioned other religions. I've only really looked at Judaism and Christianity. Christianity, all their claims, they make a lot of claims, but they're all, almost every single one of them, I would say, is absolutely false and misleading. Judaism, there's some evidence for that. As far as needing more evidence, right, we've only been able to discuss 3 on today's discussion. Of course, even myself, I would need more evidence. But like I said, there is more evidence on my website, and we do have more scientifically correct statements, to the point where now it's going to start getting ridiculous on how much the Quran agrees with science. And when we get to that point, then you will see that it has to have been supernatural authorship of the Quran.
Okay, I'm going to go from actually, Frank. I'm going to let you go right now since you're technically part of the panel. Thank you for joining, Frank. We appreciate your input. Okay, one more thing. I'm going to let you go.
Okay, thanks. I just owe Nadir an apology. Before you came in, I said that this might be a cowardice of an apology. I apologize for this. So, yeah, I'm sorry about it. You're here and you've been actually, with 5 other atheists who are here. Of course, you're able to debate and you're free to do so because you live in a nation where freedom of speech, one of many nations where freedom of speech is granted. However, unfortunately, we cannot reveal our identities. And then there is one man who is now, whose fate is unknown because he simply wrote a few lines on Twitter with a fictional dialogue with Muhammad. And now everyone wants his head down. And another Muslim country, Malaysia, is extraditing him, returning him to the country where he comes from, waiting to be slaughtered for hate. Anyways, thank you for being with us, and thanks for all the friends here for letting me join the conversation today.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Frank. Goodbye. Now,
and if anyone is interested in pursuing that or in signing the petition to save Hamza Kashgari, I'll put a link in this video.
Nadir, since our conversation is primarily about science and your website and your reason for being here is probably about science, you don't have to feel obligated to respond to what Frank said about the people, the Arab and Southeast Asian atheists. But if you'd like to comment on that situation, you're more than welcome to.
Okay, well, yeah, actually, it's it's a big deception here. When it comes to freedom of speech and religious tolerance, we only question Islam. Why don't we ask that same identical questions of Christianity? If we did, you're going to find that the answers are going to shock you. Out of all the Abrahamic religions, Islam is by far the most tolerant religion out of all of them. The most intolerant is New Testament Christianity. Here's where I would like to go from here. And this is really sad. I can't find an atheist or a Christian who's willing to defend and debate what he believes in. Almost all of them run away from debating me, or they engage in dishonest debate tactics, stuff like that. So
I hate it when people do that.
Yeah, I hope that at least, the people, they will come forward and they will challenge the claims on my website and not run away, because we're ready to.
Well, we're going to put the link to your website up on. Remember, his site is examinethetruth.com, and he has a whole list of claims of the like that we examined today, many more, of course. And people, if you do go on and there's a forum or any comment section, please be civil if anyone goes on. And, of course, if any Christians watch this video, now you know that Nadir Ahmed, I don't know how thick the H is on Nadir Ahmed is ready, willing, and able to debate any Christians who want to debate Bible versus the Quran, Christianity versus Islam. Okay, so we're going to be wrapping up pretty soon. I'm going to go from left to right on the panel, give everyone a final word, starting with Godless Saudi. Are you there? Godless? Did he drop again? I don't know what's wrong with his connection. Klingschor.
Godless, do you have your microphone muted by chance, or?
He's like, yeah, I said something.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Did you have any final word before we wrap things up?
Well, I just want to thank Nader for coming onto the show, and I wish we have the same. We have a similar conversation in the future.
Klingschor?
Yeah, two things. First of all, thank you for coming on. It was joy and a pleasure. First of all, look, with all the things you say, you keep on with these generalizations about atheists and Christians. Look, I've made my Skype public on YouTube, and I've only ever had, I think, one Muslim who's been willing to actually come on and have a proper debate with me. So let's not make these generalizations about atheists running away. I mean. But as with the whole thing, it's not surprising or miraculous that there are so many Quran miracle claims, because this is an industry that makes a lot. Look, Harun Yahya, and so they disseminate this widely. It's not miraculous that Muslim apologists are digging through the Quran, looking for little snippets in order to correlate them with science. So I don't see this as surprising at all that there are so many claims, because you're making the claims, you're digging through, so I don't see why you think this is miraculous. Anyway, it was nice chatting. Have a good one.
Okay, stop spamming.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you presented a very, a good case. I think that you should look over your website again, because, it looks a bit sloppy with verbs missing and plurals and singulars and everything mixed up. And then there's cases that simply don't make sense. So I think you should tighten up your act if you are actually going to go and continue claiming that you are presenting a case for Islam and for the Quran. So I'm totally unconvinced. Sorry.
Okay, Nadir.
Yeah, well, I would like to thank everyone for having this discussion with me, and I think we should have some more. I think if we listen to the discussion tonight, there are arguments which cannot be refuted. We do find in the Quran statements which do agree with modern science. We at least showed 3 instances of it. Is that enough to really jump to the conclusion that this book is miraculous? No, not at this point. I hope I'll have the opportunity to share more instances, and there will come a point where we're going to have to ask, wait a second, this shouldn't be happening. And we've only seen the science. We have not even taken a look at the prophecy, the accurate prophecies as well. And as for Klingschor, yes, I would love to accept this challenge. In fact, I can't find anybody. I can't find anyone who is willing to defend and debate what they believe in. There's so many anti-Islamic websites out there, like Answering Islam, Faith Freedom, stuff like that. But none of them are really ready to come forward and defend what they want to say. So, so maybe we could do that in the future.
Okay, well, that's about it for the show. Thank you, of course, to our guest. We appreciate and we acknowledge that it takes a great deal of courage to come on a show where the panel is almost entirely people of Counterpoint. So we will see everyone 2 weeks from now. Remember, the site, Nadir Ahmed, is examinethetruth.com. Also, be sure to check out all of our Arabic speakers, or anyone who just wants to support an Arabic speaking show in the same venue, Arab Atheist Broadcasting. Look for them on Blog TV, and I think they probably have a YouTube, or they probably have a YouTube, Facebook.
They do.
Arab Atheist.
Also, follow us on Facebook. We'll link it below, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Yes, it's a show in the same vein as this, but in the Arab language. Even if you don't speak Arabic, if you can find out their time, I believe they go on Fridays. I don't know if it's every week or every other week. But please just show up in the room and support them. If you go in and you raise the number of people in the chat, it increases the likelihood that they'll be featured and then get more viewers and attract more attention. Certainly, this is a debate that, as Frank showed, just isn't always available for one reason or another in certain parts of the Arabic-speaking world. So we need to do everything we can to fan that flame of discussion. And until next time, Dhalam alaikum, shadow hide you. Bye-bye.